Reflecting on my past, I could never have predicted the unexpected paths my life would take. In my younger days, I was so certain about everything, filled with confidence and optimism. I was just starting out, full of dreams, hardly even considering the possibility of setbacks. My aspirations were straightforward but genuine: a loving family, a successful career, and perhaps some adventure along the way. I was a humble person, rarely seeking attention, but always giving my best. Even as life's challenges started to emerge, I believed hard work and dedication could overcome any obstacle. Meeting Jennifer was like the beginning of a movie I never expected to star in. She entered my life quietly, without much fuss, but her impact was profound. From that moment, everything seemed to center on building a future together. Our relationship was built on what I believed was mutual respect, trust, and a love that could withstand any hardship. I immersed myself in my career, always aiming to give our family the best life possible. But as time passed, subtle changes began eroding the foundation we had built, and the life I had carefully constructed started to unravel in ways I never foresaw. I was at my desk, staring at the computer, when Jennifer walked in. It was becoming a habit, her returning late from work without much explanation. It was nearly 10 p.m., and the kids had eaten, done their homework, and gone to bed long before. They no longer asked about her absence, which deeply troubled me. The kids had adjusted to her late arrivals, and honestly, so had I. As I went over our finances, I couldn't ignore the reality any longer. In the past 2 years, our financial situation had taken a serious downturn. Our income had dropped significantly, yet Jennifer remained seemingly oblivious, spending as if nothing had changed. After paying the last of the bills, I calculated we could barely scrape by for another couple of months. I don't know how long she stood there looking at me. Lately, I've been losing myself in my thoughts more often, sometimes losing track of time. Finally, with her arms crossed and that all-too-familiar look of contempt, she spoke. "Michael, I want a divorce." I'm not sure what I felt at that moment. My mind was so weighed down with doubt and self-loathing that I was nearly numb to new emotions. It wasn't exactly funny, but I still had to stifle a laugh. My wife of 17 years just told me it's over, that everything we'd built together would soon be torn apart. I hadn't felt this kind of emotion in a long time, and it almost made me smile. Relief washed over me as I stole a brief glance at her, savoring one final moment of our happier times together, before grounding myself back in reality. "Fine," I said. I'd always been better at programming than managing, but programmers get promoted to project managers, then department heads, and eventually senior management. That's how I ended up as a senior product development manager. It was just a fancy title for a salesman. At the time, I was the most qualified for the role. I had nearly single-handedly created our flagship product line. I'd nurtured it from its infancy and developed it through 6 upgrades. I knew the product better than anyone. When clients had questions, I had answers. When employees had issues, I knew how to solve them. With a new haircut and an expensive suit, I looked the part. The pay raise and benefits with the promotion didn't hurt either. I'd say I was mostly satisfied with my job, but I loved programming and missed it a lot. In my role, I simply didn't have the opportunity. There were too many meetings and calls to get back to lines of code. I was forced to watch a new generation of bright-eyed employees try to outdo each other with their latest developments. I won't lie, being the boss had its perks, but I always wished my responsibilities were a bit different. It wasn't surprising when I was fired from Chicago Technology Solutions. In their place, I would have done the same. My attendance at meetings was sporadic at best, and I'd missed too many deadlines. At the time, I hadn't tried to get fired, but I hadn't exactly fought to keep my job either. After leaving CTS, I was in a deep depression for months. It took me nearly 3 months to crawl out of it and try to move forward. But this didn't exactly end in success either. It took me another month to find a way out of the mess I'd landed in, or at least one I could live with. I might have lost my mind if it weren't for the kids. Their consistent routine helped me regain some balance. Breakfast, school, snacks, homework, dinner, and sleep. Breakfast, school, snacks, homework, dinner, and bed. This routine became my mantra, helping me find my way again. I threw myself into life as a stay-at-home dad, taking on all the housework and taxi duties. The kids genuinely enjoyed having me home, and it reminded me that I had value. I wasn't entirely useless. If my wife noticed these changes in our family dynamic, she never mentioned it. I'm pretty sure she didn't even see it. I met Jennifer Riley at a frat party, even though I almost didn't go. I had joined the fraternity for the connections it might bring after college, not for the parties during it. I figured I'd need every advantage I could get. Academically, I was doing well, so that wasn't an issue. But in every other way, I was just average. My height, weight, looks, personality, all average. Even my name, Michael, was the most common name from 1961 to 1988. Completely average. To be honest, away from the computer, there wasn't much that stood out about me. Dating? I went on a few dates. Relationships? Not really. I was pretty good at being on my own, even in my senior year of college, until I saw Jennifer Riley. Jennifer was almost as ordinary as I was, but I noticed that the average woman tends to look better. She was a bit reserved, and I watched her for quite a while before I got the nerve to talk to her. Our first interaction was brief and quiet, but we got to know each other over the next few weeks. We met for coffee, studied together in the library, and after nearly 2 months, we had our first real date. From that moment, the most incredible time in my life began. 15 years of happiness. Our courtship was short and our engagement even shorter. Right after graduation, we got married and moved into our first apartment in Chicago. We commuted together on the morning and evening trains to our first jobs, barely scraping by but happy to be together. We had so much in common: family stories, dating experiences, shared interests, and similar goals. Where we didn't match, we complemented each other. If I couldn't handle something, Jennifer could. If she had a weakness, it was one of my strengths. I managed our finances well, while Jennifer excelled at keeping our social and family schedules in order. We worked as a team, and over the next few years, our lives steadily improved. We both received several promotions, our friend circle expanded, and we saved enough to buy our first home, allowing us to travel and enjoy life. Our physical relationship started out just like the rest of our relationship, slowly. We'd held hands and kissed since our first date and moved to more intimate affection once we were exclusive. We were both maids until the night we got engaged. Since then, our passion grew along with our success. Jennifer left her job 8 years later when our son Jacob was born. A little over a year later, our daughter, Emily, arrived. Yes, I know, their names were the most popular at the time. It had become a family tradition. We bought a 3-bedroom house in the suburbs with space for a dog, a family sedan, and a minivan. Life was going well. 2 kids, a pet, a house, and 2 cars. All pretty standard. I didn't think I could be any happier. I was wrong. My promotion to manager came shortly after Emily's first birthday, almost like a reward for years of quiet dedication in the middle class. My new salary wasn't anything extraordinary, but we weren't complaining. I had a flexible schedule and mostly worked from home, only going to the office for meetings. They say money can't buy happiness, and I believe that's true. But it can buy nicer clothes and grooming, better health care, a new home in a nicer neighborhood, and a boost of confidence. I went from average to slightly above average. My wife went from what I thought was beautiful to something undeniably attractive. Our bed life, which I'd always considered good, reached new heights. We traveled more and spent more time with the kids while saving steadily for retirement. When Emily started elementary school, Jennifer decided she wanted to go back to work part-time. She quickly landed a role she was excited about at a new marketing firm. She worked around the kids' school schedule, finishing her day when it was time to pick them up. This was the cherry on top. We didn't need her income, so we saved it. I calculated that by the time the kids graduated college, we'd be able to retire comfortably. I found out my wife was cheating on me by accident 3 months before our 15th anniversary. It happened on my birthday. Or rather, I discovered the clues 2 days before my birthday without realizing it. It took weeks for me to piece everything together. I didn't think much of her wanting to take on a bigger role at work, which meant a few extra hours a week. I started picking up the kids more, and that was fine by me. After a few months, when I noticed she seemed more distracted, I asked her about it. She said she was just stressed from trying to fit in at work, so I took on more around the house to ease her burden. When our once passionate bed life began to wane, we talked about it. She said she was getting older and didn't need as much as before. For a few weeks, our closeness picked up, but then it faded again. I avoided bringing it up again, afraid of starting an argument. I was nearly at my breaking point when I found the gift. The weather had gotten colder, and I was looking for one of my sweaters. Since I had taken over the laundry duties, I sometimes got mixed up about where my clothes went. While sorting through sweaters in her closet, I noticed it tucked behind some old shoeboxes. It was hard to miss. A pink box with a white ribbon from the lingerie store. The card addressed to my beloved got my heart racing. A small battle of thoughts flashed through my mind. Should I look? Should I wait? I wondered. I decided to peek. I wasn't sure I could wait until my birthday to open my wife's gift. After reading the card, I felt both thrilled and uneasy. It read, "Please forgive the packaging this gift came in. You can unwrap the real gift on your birthday when I wear what's in the box. Love, Jennifer." Over the next 2 days, I pulled out all the stops. I made sure to greet her with flowers, give her a foot massage, and make her favorite dinner. Her reaction wasn't what I expected. She seemed to be merely enduring my affection. On my birthday, I made sure the kids had their homework done early. I didn't want any distractions from my gift. I was a bit surprised when Jennifer came home late from work. My confusion grew when she asked, "What's for dinner?" But I went along with it. To my surprise, I replied, "We're going out for pizza." The kids enjoyed it, and we went. I had arranged with the waitress for a birthday serenade, and just before we left, the waiter sang happy birthday to me. I thought I saw a flicker of surprise in Jennifer's eyes, but she quickly hid it. "I'll give you your gift later, Michael," she said, smiling. The drive home was tense. I nearly got into an accident. The 15 minutes it took the kids to get ready for bed felt grueling, but the next 15 minutes while they fell asleep were excruciating. Fortunately, Jennifer came back from a quick trip to the store for milk right after they were asleep. When I reached the bedroom, she wasn't there. I sat on the bed. A few moments later, she emerged from the bathroom in a flannel nightgown, no makeup, and her hair in a ponytail. By this point, I was losing patience with this game. "When do I get my gift?" I asked. She climbed into bed, pulled up the covers, and reached over to turn off the light, but stopped. "Oh, almost forgot," she said, reaching into her nightstand drawer. She pulled out a small square box, wrapped in the balloon paper we'd used for Michael's last birthday, and handed it to me. "Happy birthday, honey." And that was it. She rolled over, turned off the light, and went to sleep. I was too stunned to even open her gift. The next day, my depression hit full force. I replayed the entire day in my head, trying to understand what I'd done to ruin the evening. I was completely baffled. I stayed in that despair for almost 2 weeks. That damn gift haunted me, taunting me, reminding me of my failure. I'd heard all the cliches. The husband is the last to know, and so on. I have to admit, I was genuinely clueless. The idea of Jennifer cheating on me seemed so impossible that I hadn't even considered it. But that was the first thought that came to mind when she called 13 days after my birthday, saying, "I'll be home late. It's Alan's 30th birthday, and the team's throwing him a party." I don't remember replying or even walking to the bedroom closet. But I do remember looking at the empty space where my gift had been. For a long moment, I thought I might be having a heart attack. And for just a moment, I almost hoped I was, and that it would all end right then. Alan Henderson was Jennifer's boss, a cocky, smug advertising exec who was a few years younger than both of us. I'd only met him once, but he left a bad impression. He came across as completely fake. Emily's voice snapped me back. "Are you okay, Dad?" she asked, watching me with worried eyes. I blinked and looked at her. "I'm fine, honey. Dad just ate something that didn't agree with him. I'll be out in a minute." I eventually left the bathroom, though I don't remember much after that. I remember grabbing my dusty bottle of scotch. Judging by the headache the next morning, I'd had several glasses. I had no idea when Jennifer got home. When I found her in the kitchen the next morning, feeding the kids, she acted as if nothing unusual had happened. She went about her routine, and the slight shudder I saw as she sat down to eat was all it took to eliminate the last bit of love I had for her. It was subtle, but it was there. I'd like to say I confronted my unfaithful wife, but I didn't. I was utterly crushed. I could barely function. For weeks, I moved like a zombie. Watching her go through our daily routines, I felt worse and worse. I thought I'd hit rock bottom. It took me that weekend, on our 15th anniversary, to shake myself out of it and decide to do something. I probably wouldn't have done anything. I acted like a coward. I knew it. I wish I could say I was surprised. There's probably some psychological term for it. If my father were alive, he'd simply call it cowardice. And he'd be right. It wasn't until my wife announced she had to attend a work conference that things started to clear up for me. She won't even be here for our anniversary, I thought, feeling bitter. I didn't know why it bothered me so much. It was just another layer of disrespect, but it stung because she didn't even seem aware of the date. After drowning my sorrows the night of our anniversary, I woke up angry. I've had enough, I told myself. I called my lawyer and set up an appointment. I was ready to end this charade. I thought my life couldn't get worse. I was wrong. I walked into the lawyer's office full of resolve, but that quickly turned to disbelief. I knew divorce could be rough, but I assumed my wife's cheating would help my case. Instead, my lawyer picked apart my assumptions. I had no evidence of the affair, and even if I did, it wouldn't impact the division of assets, 50-50ths. I had no proof she was an unfit parent, so the best I could hope for was joint custody. The income gap worked in her favor, meaning I'd likely be paying alimony and spousal support. She'd probably get primary custody and the right to stay in the house for the kids. My wife was a cheater, and I was a fool. I went from feeling defeated to downright angry. A few weeks later, my wife asked me, "You don't look well, Michael. Is something wrong?" "No, darling." At least she pretended to care. And I just drifted through life. Then I lost my job. I didn't realize it at the time, but it was the best thing that could have happened to me. I was watching the evening news, absorbing one depressing story after another, feeling it all fit my mood. Then there it was. A major employer on the East Coast had gone bankrupt, leaving employees struggling for their last paychecks and worried about pensions. It struck me that maybe some people had it worse than I did. The analyst on TV said the employees would likely win a lawsuit against their employer, but it wouldn't matter because the money was already gone. It didn't take me long to piece together a plan. My wife couldn't take what wasn't there. If we had nothing, there'd be nothing to split. I knew I'd be hurting myself, but I was already set to lose half. Did I really care about the rest? I started with a simple approach. I was unemployed and had no plans to job hunt. I'd use our savings until it ran dry. It was a wild idea, and I doubted it would work, but it gave me something to hold on to. 2 years is a long time, and I was painfully bored, especially since I spent most of it alone. Jennifer had always been the heart of our social circle, and once she pulled away, I realized I didn't have any close friends. I was an only child. Both my parents had passed young. My dad from a heart attack, my mom from cancer. I was truly alone except for my kids, who were the only bright spot in my life. I enrolled in an executive MBA program. It was a local university, but pricey, costing almost $120,000 up front. I bought a new luxury SUV for $60,000. I maxed out my kids' college funds, which was another $260,000. I spent thousands on a new wardrobe and started taking out more cash twice a week. I dropped the kids at school, go to the bank, and then head to the lake. I never gambled with the cash. I'd take a few bills here and there just to show I'd been at the casino. I even saved receipts for lunch, snacks, and parking. Most of the cash went into a safe in our garage, my personal stash for after the divorce if things got rough. One more big expense was surveillance on my wife and her lover. I hired someone to get everything. Videos, photos, a daily log of her activities. I'm embarrassed by how much it cost. You might wonder if she noticed my spending. I'd say yes, except for the gambling part. I had to tell her about the college fund since I needed her signature. She saw the new car and clothes. She didn't say anything. She probably assumed I was still working and that we were financially set. She even made some big purchases herself, but I didn't comment. I often wondered who her new lingerie was really for. We never discussed it. We were like cordial roommates, barely interested in closeness. No point even going there. Time with my kids was the highlight of my life. I tried to support whatever hobbies they wanted. We did homework, played games, went to parks, rode bikes, and watched movies. I'd taken on cooking, and the kids liked helping. I found easy recipes and let them try. Jennifer was around at some point each week. I didn't exclude her from family activities, but I didn't go out of my way to include her. If she wanted to join, she did. Quietly, I received weekly updates on her actions. I'd thought she was only involved with her boss, but it turned out there were other men from the office. Later, her clients joined the picture. It was painful to see. She had already fallen in my eyes, and having proof didn't make it better. In some way, it gave me closure, but not much. It became clear that Alan Henderson was not exactly a skilled lover, though he seemed capable of juggling several women at once. I found this surprising. I had assumed, given the gift, that he and my wife shared something meaningful, but in reality, they were more like casual hookups. The same went for most of the other 6 men she was seeing. About a year into this, I realized I hadn't had sex since I started down this path. It didn't bother me much. It was just another layer of my wonderful life. I eventually stopped monitoring her activities. It felt more like a chore going through the updates they sent. Despite my classes, taking care of the kids, and my gambling ruse, I had a lot of time on my hands, so I began planning my life post-marriage, which I assumed would happen someday. I started a new workout routine. I'd always been in decent shape, nothing special, of course, but I started achieving good results in bench pressing and running. I believe that big muscles and looks are largely genetic, and I didn't fall into either category, but Personally, I was happy with how I looked. I also started catching up on the latest news in my old industry, realizing I'd need a job at some point. A year away had put me further behind than I'd thought. I spent hours daily learning new technologies and software. I took a particular interest in my old company, CTS. They seemed stagnant, not losing market share but not gaining any either. In tech, standing still means falling behind. I also dove into studying divorce. Sure, I spent some time concocting new schemes to disrupt my soon-to-be ex-wife's life, but mostly I focused on understanding how divorce impacts kids. I had gone through most of my pain, and my kids were a big part of my life. I wanted to make sure that when the time came, I'd be fully prepared for their sake. There's a mountain of information out there, and a lot of it seemed like nonsense. About 8 months into my new life, though, I started to panic. My wife began coming home at the usual time, striking up conversations and asking how my day was. I gave her curt answers, which didn't seem to faze her. She even started dressing more provocatively for bed, seemingly trying to revive the closeness of our old life. A few weeks later, it got worse. After a year and a half of ignoring our lives, she suddenly complained about a lack of communication. She started talking about working on our marriage, and I just shut down. Silence became my answer to everything. Her attempts at reconciliation continued until her birthday. I left her gift on the dining table. The wrapping paper must have looked familiar since I used the same one from the last gift she gave me. The contents shouldn't have been a shock either. It had taken me 6 months to open my last birthday gift from her, a cheap digital watch from a convenience store, priced at $9.95. Seeing it made me furious. When I later saw a matching women's watch, I knew what I'd do. I bought it and waited 18 months to give it to her. I wish I could have seen her reaction, but we weren't there when she opened it. The kids and I had a late movie night and got home well past noon the next day. She left before any of us were up. Just like that, everything returned to normal. Jennifer started staying late at the office again, and we barely spoke at home. Finally, the day I'd been waiting for arrived. "Michael, I want a divorce." I hoped she'd handle it quickly, but nearly a week went by before I received her statement. It was almost laughable. Spousal and child support, an uneven asset split in her favor, and allegations of mental and emotional cruelty. I gave her until Monday, then took the kids camping. I didn't want them around for what was coming. We returned 6 days later, rested and refreshed. Jennifer was home, sitting alone in the living room, looking visibly unwell. Reflecting on it, I wondered which part surprised me the most. I filed for divorce on grounds of infidelity, requesting the house, our last real asset, and full custody of the kids. I also requested spousal and child support since I'd been unemployed and the primary caregiver for 2 years. I filed alienation of affection claims against Jennifer's 7 partners, even though I had no illusions of winning. But Illinois law allowed it, so I went for it. I also filed civil suits against her employer and 3 client companies for exploiting her. I didn't expect to win, but the bad press might help my case. Finally, I sent a DVD of Jennifer's greatest hits to her parents and best friends so she'd know I wasn't afraid to use it. She must have known the evidence I had. All of this was in my counterclaim, but I didn't want to take any chances. The kids had a snack and headed to their rooms for bed, barely acknowledging their mom. She made no effort to connect with them. I grabbed a beer from the fridge and went to the living room, sitting across from her. She avoided eye contact for a long time, so I simply enjoyed my drink. Besides looking physically unwell, she seemed to be crying about something. Perhaps she was hurt in more ways than one. She finally spoke, her voice barely audible. "You're going to ruin me." I waited until her eyes met mine before responding. It took a moment. "I really hope so." I had imagined this moment would feel more intense, especially as a single tear formed and slid down her cheek. But I felt nothing. She asked, "Do you hate me that much?" "Oh no, Jennifer, I don't hate you. Hate requires effort, and I don't expend any effort on you. All my energy is focused on taking care of myself and my children." "I'm still your wife," she insisted. "Stop." I shook my head. "I won't let someone like you tarnish the memory of my wife. My wife was loving, caring, a true partner and mother to my kids. She's gone. You're just the woman who replaced her. Don't talk as if you mean anything to me." It was a long time before she spoke again. "What am I supposed to do now? Are you actually asking or just being rhetorical?" I didn't wait for an answer. "There are a few options. You could go far away and try starting over. Honestly, I'd recommend it." I won't allow you to have any real place in our children's lives, so that shouldn't weigh on your choice to leave. Or you could stick around here hoping I keep quiet. But who knows what people will hear about you, or what kind of job someone like you could get. Maybe you could settle down with a guy who doesn't mind what you've become, but what kind of person would he be? Or you could end it all. Though, I'd rather you didn't. It would rob me of seeing you deal with the consequences. Not that my opinion mattered when you chose to start an affair with your boss. I'd rehearsed this speech in my head for months. Watching her spirit crumble with each word, I thought I'd feel satisfaction. Instead, I just felt empty. Life post-divorce was dominated by legal battles. I ended up doing far better than expected, receiving over $1 million in settlements from 3 companies whose employees had been involved with my wife. It surprised even my lawyer, who hadn't expected much. We figured those companies just wanted to avoid bad publicity after seeing what we'd done to my ex-wife's employer. We destroyed her company with discovery motions, depositions, and leaks to the media. I even took things further, emailing the CEOs of their remaining clients with the details about my wife, her boss, and their escapades. Over time, their revenue dwindled. Employees left to avoid the association, and eventually they filed for bankruptcy. Alan Henderson was fired and left town in disgrace. The $200,000 settlement from that was less than the others, but it was sweet. I got nothing from the alienation of affection claims, as expected, though 4 of the involved men's wives eventually filed for divorce. It wasn't all happy endings for them. In pursuing all this, I ended up hurting myself too. It wasn't unusual to run into people who knew about my situation. For a while, the mocking and whispers got out of hand. Strangely enough, I didn't care. Already feeling like a failure, their words didn't touch me. A few of these people were actually clever. Protecting my children from the fallout was always my top priority. They were down for a while, but bounced back eventually. My biggest success was returning to CTS as Vice President of Design and Development. Returning to programming helped me escape personal struggles. Over 2 difficult years, I developed an add-on to the main CTS software, allowing it to integrate seamlessly with 2 competitor platforms. I founded a company to market my software, and within a year, received acquisition offers from all 3 major competitors. CTS bought my company and software for $11 million, along with a lucrative compensation package. Though I'd thought of retiring, my lack of a social life convinced me that I'd turn into a recluse without a reason to get up every day. My new income allowed me to hire a sweet older woman as a part-time housekeeper and nanny for the kids. A year later, Mrs. Marlene Jensen moved in full-time, living in the apartment above our new garage. She became like a grandmother to my children, warm and kind, but firm when needed. What I valued most was her wisdom and the advice she gave my children, advice that only comes with experience. I loved my children deeply and did my best to be a devoted father, but I was also damaged, bitter, and harsh. I turned to her for guidance, and she was my rock whenever I had difficult decisions to make. My kids grew up to be well-adjusted adults, and I saw them with their families from time to time. Over the years, though, our closeness faded. I didn't blame them. It was better they kept their distance so my bitterness wouldn't seep into their lives. Mrs. Jensen stayed with us until the kids left for college, then retired. I offered her free room and board as a pension. She was a constant in my life. For 15 years, she gently encouraged me to live again and find someone to share my life with. I appreciated her efforts, but ultimately, she passed away knowing I would remain alone. I never opened up to anyone else. My friendships were shallow and unfulfilling. I never dated except for a few group dinners with acquaintances. I gained a reputation for being a cold, unyielding person, and most people avoided me. I couldn't blame them. I'd brought it on myself. My physical needs were easily handled. With my growing wealth, I kept a steady rotation of call girls, paying well for their time and company. Typically, it was just about having sex and then sending them on their way. One of them, Candy, real name Mary Beth, stood out to me. She was passionate and willing, and I think I meant a little more to her than just a client. But I couldn't let anyone else get close to my own baggage, so when she began showing signs of attachment, I let her go. If you're curious about Jennifer, she faced a rough life. She tried to reconnect for nearly a year. I'm not sure what she hoped to achieve. Reconciliation, or perhaps a relationship with the kids. I gave her a fair warning, but she didn't heed it. She stayed in Chicago, and I made sure her past was there to greet her at every turn. When she applied for jobs, her record somehow always followed her. When she started dating, which was right away, I sent her suitors reminders. revealing exactly who they'd be letting into their lives. It didn't matter if they stayed after learning the truth, but I wasn't going to let her rewrite history and ignore what she'd done. If I had to live with it every day, so would she. Jennifer continued her constant stream of calls and emails that I never answered, filling up my inbox. A part of me took a dark satisfaction in her suffering. Early on, maybe I should have sought help. It might have saved part of my sanity and allowed me to rebuild a normal life. But I never did. And as time passed, it seemed too late to change. I could have changed my phone number or had someone else sort through the messages, but I didn't. I could have blocked her emails to avoid accidentally seeing her apologies, but they meant nothing to me. Of course, things spiraled. Yes, she claimed she'd always loved me and that she'd suffered enough. I responded with a gift and a simple note. I bought the most revealing lingerie I could find at her favorite store, neatly wrapped it with a white ribbon to accentuate the pink box, and added a handwritten note. I imagine she caught the irony when she opened the card addressed to the witch. One of her boyfriends even tried to confront me for maltreating her, showing up at my door full of liquid courage and shoving me back as soon as I opened it. That was his mistake. I'm nothing extraordinary, no martial arts or combat training, just an average guy. I'd never been violent or even in a fight, but I had a reservoir of rage, unspent and undiluted, directed at my wife and her lovers. He ended up on the receiving end. In the end, I got away with minor burns and a cracked rib. He was lucky to survive. He pled guilty to misdemeanor attack and trespassing, receiving probation. The years of reconstructive surgery and rehab probably left a stronger impression on him. After that, Jennifer stopped trying to contact me. I eventually stopped monitoring her after she landed a full-time job cleaning rooms at a roadside hotel in rural Virginia, 700 miles away. The only time I saw her again was 16 years later at our daughter's wedding. I know the kids reconnected with Jennifer after they graduated from college, and I never tried to stop them. The years hadn't been kind to her. She'd gained at least 40 pounds, had deep lines around her mouth, and bore other telltale signs of smoking. A new habit. She looked worn down and old, but somewhere beneath it, I still saw the woman I once loved. I felt nothing for her, but I saw her. She sat quietly in the bridal section near the back of the church, keeping her interactions with our daughter brief, polite, and distant. She never tried to approach me. All evening we stayed at a distance, never coming within 30 feet of each other. She stood on the curb waiting for a taxi. When I noticed the modest gold ring with a tiny diamond on her finger, I felt a faint smile creep up, my first in a long time. Maybe she'd made a better choice than I had. I walked over, studying the ring for a moment before finally meeting her gaze. Sadness clouded her eyes. "For the record," she said quietly, "you ruined my life first." I glanced from her hand back to her face. "I'm glad you found someone. I hope he makes you happy." With that, I turned and walked to my car where my driver awaited. "Good evening, Mr. Smith. I hope you had a pleasant evening. Are we heading to the club?" "It went as well as I expected, Jonathan. Let's just go straight home. Tonight I'd rather be alone." "Of course, sir." As we pulled away, I tried not to look back, but in the rearview mirror I caught a glimpse of her waving goodbye.
Michael Smith wasn't conventionally handsome or particularly noticeable at first glance, but he was kind, somewhat attractive, and incredibly smart. We met on one of my worst nights in college, left alone at a frat party by my sorority sisters who ditched me to hook up with random guys. After 2 hours of fending off drunk strangers, Michael approached, introduced himself softly, and held my gaze. Just before leaving, he offered me his number, saying he'd love to grab coffee sometime. That brief encounter ended up being the highlight of my semester. After a week, I reached out and we met for coffee. Talking with him was easy. He was knowledgeable on every topic, studying computer science, but clearly well-rounded enough for any field. He asked about my studies, especially ancient philosophy, which I struggled with as a business and advertising major. He suggested studying together, and we soon found ourselves in the library. That night, he patiently helped me prepare for my philosophy exam, adapting his explanations when I didn't understand, never making me feel stupid. When I passed, he sounded genuinely happy for me, though he downplayed his role, calling it a selfish excuse to spend time together. Over the following weeks, Michael's focus on his studies and his lack of interest in parties drew me in. We didn't go on formal dates, but he'd call daily, leave thoughtful notes, and ask about my family, dreams, and interests. In turn, he was open when I asked about his life. One day I asked him what he feared most. After a pause, he admitted he was afraid of not being a good father. As an only child who lost his parents in high school and grew up with a distant uncle, he had little experience with a supportive family. He wanted to marry and have kids, but feared he wouldn't know how to be a good father. When he looked at me, waiting for a reaction, I simply said, "Not too much, Michael, just enough." About a month later, he asked if I was free on Saturday. When I said yes, he planned to pick me up, keeping his intentions secret. The anticipation kept me on edge, with my sorority sisters smiling knowingly. When Michael finally arrived, he was dressed in burgundy and sky blue, along with 3 of his fraternity brothers who brought a large refrigerator and heated trays of food. He handed me a West Ham shirt, a DVD, and flashed a big smile, asking to see the house's main room. As we walked in, my sorority sisters and his friends, all dressed in West Ham colors, began chanting. I was stunned. Once, I'd mentioned missing my family's trip to England to watch my cousin who played for West Ham United. I couldn't go because of exams and had felt disappointed. Michael had arranged everything. He'd asked a friend to record a West Ham game, learned the team chants, and even brought English ale and fish and chips. When my cousin scored, he silenced the room so I could watch. It was delayed but still felt special, something even my family didn't experience. After the game, he and his friends cleaned up and headed out, leaving me to fend off my friends' teasing about the look in my eyes. It was worth it. Over the next weeks, we kept meeting for coffee and exchanging notes. One day, he nervously asked if I'd like to have dinner with him on Friday, officially as a date. I said yes, and he broke into the biggest smile I'd ever seen. From that point on, everything felt like a whirlwind of love and joy. I thrived in school and felt more confident. Michael always made me feel special, even though he humbly saw himself as lucky to be with me. He was smart, polite, well-dressed, and modest, never flaunting his intelligence or popularity. At graduation, my sorority hosted its usual ritual where each sister's boyfriend received reviews. Michael received only positive reviews, a first in the event's 29-year history. I was proud beyond words, but couldn't tell him, as tradition kept it a secret. A few days later, Michael drove me home to Chicago. He'd landed a job there, and during the trip, we held hands, talked, and stopped for breakfast. When we arrived, he charmed my parents and even invited my dad out for a beer. Watching them leave, my mom turned to me teary-eyed and said, "Jennifer, this one's a keeper. Trust me, Mom, I know." Michael and my dad were all smiles and laughter as they came back to the front door. After their 2-hour outing, Michael told me he'd be back for dinner and quickly left to check into his hotel. That's when he shared that he'd asked my father's permission to marry me. That night was unforgettable. After a romantic Italian dinner, Michael proposed on the Willis Tower skydeck, overlooking the stunning Chicago skyline, a view that seemed to mirror the happiness I felt inside. In college, being a maid had felt slightly embarrassing, like I was the last one in my sorority, but that night it became a meaningful gift. Michael was equally inexperienced, yet he was tender, loving, and patient, making it an incredible first experience. When I asked how he was so gentle and skilled, he simply whispered, "I read a lot of books." Our life felt close to perfect. Michael quickly landed a great job and moved up the ladder, and our first decade of marriage was filled with joy and growth. Our children enriched our lives, though those years aren't central to my story of what went wrong. Reflecting on it now, I realize that I allowed my insecurities to take root because I didn't fully share them with Michael. Michael was always open with me, even about his insecurities. He treated me as an equal partner in every decision, despite his higher income and financial savvy. Mostly I felt valued, but sometimes I felt inadequate, like I wasn't doing enough to match his contributions. I never expressed this to him, but I now know he would have helped me if I had. He loved me deeply and would have supported me. Over the years, these insecurities grew, and by the time our kids started school, I felt a need for something of my own. I didn't want a lover. I loved my husband and felt fulfilled in our relationship, though our love life had become a bit routine. I knew Michael would have liked to try new things, but I was hesitant, thinking it might disrupt a good thing. Instead, I wanted to feel a real sense of independence, so I decided to get a job. I prepared to defend my choice to Michael, but he simply said, "That sounds great, Jennifer, whatever makes you happy." With his support, I dove into my new role, feeling empowered and self-sufficient. Looking back, my early pride in my newfound independence feels painfully naive, but at the time it was thrilling. My workplace was filled with youthful energy and boldness. The atmosphere was openly flirtatious, with some colleagues having casual relationships. To them, Zex wasn't about commitment, but confidence. There was no secrecy, and no one seemed to judge. My boss, Alan Henderson, was notorious around the office for his casual flings, and people often joked about his latest conquests. He wasn't my type, and I initially brushed him off. Still, it made me wonder if Michael and I were missing something in our intimate life. My social circle didn't discuss Zex openly, unlike the constant talk I heard at work after our first Christmas party together. Introducing Alan to Michael changed everything. I sensed a tension between them, though they acted cordial. After that, I avoided talking about work with Michael and never mentioned Alan. Meanwhile, at the office, Alan's interest in me grew. He started praising my work publicly, inviting me to lunch to discuss projects, and subtly complimenting my appearance with terms like sexy and provocative. Months passed, and I let myself be drawn in by Alan's attention. I can't recall how I ended up half-dressed with Alan on his desk after hours, but I know I felt a rush I hadn't felt in years. Later, looking back, I saw the depth of my betrayal. Michael, my true partner, had always been considerate and open, gently trying to bring more excitement into our relationship, but I had ignored him. Alan's manipulation became clear when he didn't react well to me ending things. The next day, he laughed at me and threw me out of his office. Later, I found a package on my desk with compromising photos of us and a note to meet him at 5:30. Those photos kept me tethered to him for another 18 months. I became trapped, forced into situations I hated, feeling like a pawn in Alan's twisted game. Eventually, I found the courage to say, "I've had enough. Show the photos if you want." Alan's dismissive laugh signaled it was over. I walked away, feeling both liberated and foolish. When I woke up from my nightmare, I was stunned by the state of our house. Michael and the kids seemed to be managing perfectly well without me. Deep down, I'd thought they'd struggle once they faced the neglect I had subjected them to, but the reality was the complete opposite. It seemed I wasn't needed at all. Michael was clearly thriving, new car, new clothes, and looking every bit the successful leader. Realizing how long I had ignored my family made me feel awful. I resolved to devote myself to them from that point on and do everything I could to make up for my betrayal. But a gap had opened between us that hadn't been there before. I often wondered how long it had been growing. Michael never raised his voice or argued with me, but he treated me like an unwelcome guest. I decided to take real action. I tried to seduce him with lingerie and hints, but nothing worked. He barely touched me. Months later, I took stock of our marriage. No closeness, no sex, and no communication. I couldn't live like that, so I suggested marriage counseling. That's when Michael stopped speaking to me altogether. Not just a lack of trust. He went silent for weeks. It pushed me to the edge. When my birthday came, I allowed myself to feel hopeful. Surely he wouldn't ignore me on my birthday. But I was so wrong. I came home expecting a celebration, only to find the house empty. On the dining table, there was only a small wrapped box. I knew what it was even before I opened it. Years earlier, I'd panicked and forgotten Michael's birthday, grabbing a cheap watch from a nearby store with the intention of making it up to him later, a promise I never kept. My mistake was thoughtless. His gift was intentional. By the time I went to bed, I was furious. Keeping the kids from me on my birthday felt cruel. I couldn't believe he'd go that far. And that gift, it was beyond the line. I should have realized something was terribly wrong. The symbolism should have clued me in. Michael wasn't a vindictive person. He'd always been the kindest, most caring man I'd known. If I hadn't let my anger blind me, I might have saved our marriage. If I'd confessed my mistakes and asked for forgiveness, maybe there'd have been hope. But at that moment, I stopped focusing on fixing things and started thinking about divorce. Sad but determined, I spent weeks with my lawyer, planning the details. I told her about Michael's distance and even cruelty, how he kept the kids from me, ignored counseling, and had gone silent. My lawyer went after my claims, assuring me I'd be compensated fairly. Reviewing the terms felt like I was securing a fair deal and standing up for what I needed to move on. All that was left was to break the news. I stood silently in the doorway of his office, looking at the man who had once been my husband and soulmate. He looked like the same person, yet he wasn't. Finally, I had enough. "Michael, I want a divorce." A long silence followed, but he showed no emotion. It almost looked like he was smiling, but maybe it was just shock. He had to be shocked because his response was so unexpected. No yelling, no questions. "Fine," he said. That was it. The following Friday, he was served with the divorce papers. That weekend, Michael seemed in a surprisingly good mood. But if he was trying to make amends, it was too late. I was in no mood for reconciliation. He even saw me off at the door when I left for work on Monday morning. Too little, too late, I thought. The moment I stepped into the office, an uneasy feeling washed over me, though I couldn't quite put my finger on why. In the conference room, my boss, the company president, and our corporate lawyer were locked in a heated argument, papers flying back and forth between them. Their commotion absorbed my attention so completely that I didn't even notice the man standing by my desk, until he spoke, making me jump. "Jennifer Smith?" I blinked, taken aback. "Yes?" He extended a stack of documents toward me. "You've been served." He handed me a thick envelope, snapped a quick photo of me, and walked away. I didn't even have time to sit down, let alone look at the documents inside. The moment he left, an HR manager and a security guard appeared. "Mrs. Smith, you're being suspended pending an investigation into allegations of inappropriate conduct in the workplace. Please gather your personal items and leave the premises," she said. It was humiliating to pack my things while my colleagues watched. Being escorted out was even worse. I had no idea what was happening. I was barely out of the parking lot when my phone rang. It was my lawyer. She didn't even give me a chance to say hello before launching into a tirade, berating me for hiding critical information and making her look like a fool. Those were the only phrases that made any sense. I drove home in silence. The house was empty when I arrived. It wasn't until I'd calmed down enough to remember the envelope that I realized the nightmare I'd set in motion. Michael's counter-petition was brutal. Almost all of my affairs were documented. Our savings were gone. He'd spent nearly everything. But the word infidelity hit me hardest. I thought things couldn't get worse, but I was wrong. I tried calling my parents for support. My father called me an idiot and hung up. He didn't have to explain why. I already knew. Those next 7 days were the loneliest of my life, though later I'd look back on them as some of the better days. I found a note from Michael later saying he'd taken the kids camping and would be back on Sunday. That first night, my oldest friend Rebecca called around 7 p.m. She told me Michael had sent her a DVD and warned me I didn't want to know its contents. Over the next few days, my lawyer laid out just how hopeless my situation was. I'd been fired for misconduct, and Michael had filed lawsuits against my company, several clients, and all my affair partners. I'd lose custody of my kids and everything else. By that point, I was willing to do anything if Michael would just call off the legal attacks. I tried to prepare myself for his return, but I couldn't stop the tears. When he finally came home with the kids, I was a wreck. The kids walked past me as though I were invisible, and Michael followed them, a beer in hand, his expression cold and indifferent. I barely managed to get the words out. "You're going to ruin me," I whispered. His response, laced with hatred, was devastating. "God, I hope so." I wasn't really talking to him, just voicing my thoughts. But he launched into a tirade that lasted several minutes, each word tearing me down further. When he finished, he simply walked away. I didn't give up after that. I tried to reconnect, but Michael wouldn't talk to me. I wondered how he and the kids were coping without any money, but they seemed fine. Sometimes I'd watch from a distance as he dropped them off or picked them up from school. I couldn't find a job, so I collected unemployment benefits. My parents refused to speak to me. I drifted between different men's homes, mostly divorced men, never staying long. One day I'd be welcome, and the next they'd ask me to leave. On my lawyer's advice, I began seeing a therapist. She thought showing remorse and seeking help might improve my case. I had little hope, but I worked through several issues, most of which I've shared here. The best advice she gave me came toward the end of our sessions. She told me to run far, far away. Somehow, knowing Michael was aware of my infidelity hurt even more. I cried uncontrollably. At the time, I was living with a friend's friend, a decent guy named Robert, who seemed interested in something more. When he came in to see what was wrong, I noticed he'd been drinking. When he saw the package, he got furious and stormed out before I could stop him. I got worried when Robert hadn't returned after several hours. I should have been more alarmed. At the hospital, the nurses wouldn't tell me much, but I pieced the story together. Apparently, Robert confronted Michael, and Michael nearly knocked him to pass away. Robert's face was disfigured. He had a concussion, internal injuries, and a shattered left leg. I was terrified. My problems were hurting the people around me. At my next therapy session, I shared the story. My therapist started asking questions about Michael. I told her everything I knew. He was an only child, orphaned young, deeply devoted to me and the kids, and I shared what he'd done to Robert. By the end, she looked visibly shaken. "You need to leave and never look back. Don't contact him. Don't let him know where you are. There's no hope of reconciling. If you push him, he will likely eliminate you. You've broken a fragile person who's endured lifelong disappointments. He'll never forgive or forget. Just go." And so I ran. I left behind memories of my once perfect life for a rundown college town in Virginia, where I found a job that was even worse. Years later, I met a man who could tolerate my past. The best I can say is he didn't smell bad or hit me. There was no love between us, only friendship. It felt like part of my punishment. As my children grew older, they reached out from time to time, mostly to say hello and remind me they were still alive, and that they knew I was too. But they never asked to meet or have me in their lives. Meanwhile, Michael seemed to flourish in my absence. I followed his success as best I could. He became a superstar in software, amassing a vast fortune. His personal life remained a mystery. I only saw him once more, at our daughter's wedding. The invitation had surprised me. When he appeared, he looked incredible, just like the man I had once loved and ultimately betrayed. I felt a wave of nerves as he approached, clearly ready with one final, biting remark. "For the record," I said, "you ruined my life first." He glanced down at the modest wedding ring on my finger, and for a moment, I regretted wearing it. "I'm glad you found someone," he added. "I hope he makes you happy," and with that, he turned and walked away.
Hey there, and welcome back to Cheating Tales Lab. We're so glad to have you here today. We hope you enjoy this story we've prepared for you. So sit back, relax, and let's get into it. Alfonso Manning's key turned in the lock with a soft click. The house was quiet, almost too quiet. He stepped inside, the weight of his travel bag pulling at his shoulder. "Shannon," he called out, his voice echoing through the empty rooms. No answer. He glanced at his watch. 4:30 p.m. Shannon wouldn't be home from work for another hour at least. Alfonso had wrapped up his security consultation job early, hoping to surprise his wife. Now, standing in the silent house, an inexplicable unease settled over him. He made his way upstairs, his footsteps heavy on the wooden steps. In their bedroom, he dropped his bag on the bed and began unpacking, his movements automatic after years of business trips. Suits went on hangers, dirty laundry in the hamper, toiletries back in the bathroom. As he hung up his last shirt in Shannon's closet, something caught his eye. A slight irregularity in the back panel, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. And Alfonso, with years of security work under his belt, was always looking. "What the hell?" he muttered, running his fingers along the edge. There was definitely something off about this panel. He pressed gently, feeling for any give. With a soft click, a hidden compartment popped open. Alfonso's brow furrowed as he reached in, his fingers closing around something plastic. He pulled out a stack of unlabeled DVDs. His heart began to race, a sense of foreboding washing over him. Why would Shannon have hidden DVDs? What could possibly be on them that she needed to keep secret? With trembling hands, he grabbed one of the discs and headed to the living room. The DVD player whirred to life, and Alfonso sank onto the couch, remote in hand. The screen flickered, and his world shattered. There was Shannon, his wife of 5 years, laughing and holding hands with William Caldwell, their next-door neighbor and a prominent city councilman. The date stamp in the corner showed this was from just 2 weeks ago, when Alfonso had been on another business trip. No, 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 Alfonso whispered, his voice cracking. This couldn't be happening. There had to be some explanation. He changed the disc, desperate for context, for anything that would make sense of what he was seeing. But each new video only deepened the betrayal. Shannon with Gordon Avery, her boss and CEO of a major tech company. Shannon with Terrence Navarro, her own cousin and a well-known philanthropist. Alfonso's mind reeled. How long had this been going on? How many others were there? And why in God's name had Shannon recorded it all? As he watched, numb with shock, a recurring theme began to emerge. In each video, Shannon mentioned a special group she wanted her lovers to join. You'd be perfect for our little club, Shannon purred to William in one clip, her hand resting on his thigh. We could use someone with your connections. I don't know, Shannon, William replied, looking nervous. It sounds complicated. Shannon laughed, the sound sending chills down Alfonso's spine. It wasn't her usual laugh. This was calculated, almost predatory. Oh, darling. It's only as complicated as you make it. Think of the possibilities. Alfonso's security training kicked in, overriding his emotional turmoil. This wasn't just infidelity. The way Shannon manipulated each man, the careful way she broached the topic of this group, it all reeked of a calculated scheme. He rewound the videos, watching them again with a critical eye. In one, Shannon was with Gordon Avery in what looked like a high-end hotel room. Gordon, sweetie, Shannon cooed. You know how much the group could benefit from your expertise. Think of the doors you could open for us. Gordon looked uncertain. I don't know, Shannon. My position? It's delicate. If anyone found out, Shannon cut him off with a kiss. No one will find out. We protect our own. Isn't that worth something? Alfonso's stomach churned. He fast-forwarded through scenes of intimacy, focusing on the conversations. With Terrence, Shannon took a different approach. Terrence, darling, she said, her voice honey-sweet. Think of all the good we could do with your connections. The charity work alone. Terrence seemed more eager than the others. You really think I could make a difference? Shannon's smile was triumphant. Oh, absolutely. We're going to change the world, one person at a time. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the living room, Alfonso sat in stunned silence. The woman on these videos, she wasn't the Shannon he knew, or thought he knew. This Shannon was manipulative, cunning, and deeply involved in something that set off every alarm bell in Alfonso's head. He glanced at his watch again. Shannon would be home soon. He needed to act normal, to pretend he hadn't just had his entire world turned upside down. But more than that, he needed help. This was bigger than just his marriage. Whatever Shannon was involved in, it was dangerous. Alfonso made a decision. He carefully returned the DVDs to their hiding place, making sure everything looked undisturbed. Then he picked up his phone, scrolling through his contacts. He needed someone he could trust, someone with the skills to dig deeper into this special group. His finger hovered over a name, Sylvia Rodriguez, a former colleague who'd left the security world to become a private investigator. If anyone could help him unravel this mystery, it was her. Taking a deep breath, Alfonso pressed call. The next morning, Alfonso sat at his desk at Elite Guard Solutions, staring blankly at his computer screen. The words blurred before his eyes, his mind still reeling from yesterday's discovery. He'd barely slept, lying awake next to Shannon, hyper-aware of every move she made, every breath she took. How could she sleep so peacefully while their entire life together was a lie? Manning, you all right? His colleague, Jake, peered at him from across the room. You look like hell, man. Alfonso forced a smile, hoping it didn't look as fake as it felt. Just a rough night. I'm fine. As soon as Jake turned away, Alfonso pulled out his phone. His conversation with Sylvia last night had been brief. She'd agreed to meet him today. His fingers hovered over her name for a moment before he pressed call, his heart pounding. Sylvia Rodriguez speaking, came the crisp voice on the other end. Sylvia, it's Alfonso. We still on for lunch? There was a pause. Of course. The cafe we discussed in an hour? Alfonso glanced at his watch. I'll be there. An hour later, they sat in a quiet corner of a nearby cafe. Alfonso's coffee went cold as he recounted his discovery to Sylvia, whose face remained impassive throughout. And in every video, she keeps mentioning this special group. Alfonso finished, his voice low. Sylvia, I've never seen Shannon like this. The way she was manipulating these men. It was like watching a stranger. Sylvia leaned back, her eyes sharp. So you want me to dig into this special group Shannon's involved with? Alfonso nodded. I need to know what I'm dealing with here, Sylvia. This feels bigger than just affairs. The way she was talking about connections, about changing the world, I'm worried she's gotten involved in something dangerous. Alfonso nodded. I need to know what I'm dealing with here, Sylvia. This feels bigger than just affairs. The way she was talking about connections, about changing the world, I'm worried she's gotten involved in something dangerous. Sylvia's expression softened slightly. I'll do what I can, Alfonso, but you need to prepare yourself. Whatever I find, it might not be pretty. I know, Alfonso said, his voice barely above a whisper. But I need to know the truth, no matter how ugly it is. Sylvia reached across the table, squeezing his hand briefly. I'll start digging. In the meantime, you need to act normal. If Shannon suspects you know anything, it could make things a lot more complicated. Alfonso nodded, feeling a weight settle on his shoulders. How long do you think it'll take? Hard to say, Sylvia replied. If this group is as sophisticated as it sounds, they'll have covered their tracks well. Give me a few weeks. I'll contact you if I find anything significant. As they parted ways, Alfonso felt a mix of relief and dread. Relief that he wasn't facing this alone anymore, and dread at what Sylvia might uncover. Over the next few weeks, Alfonso lived in a state of constant tension. At home, he forced himself to act normal around Shannon, his skin crawling every time she touched him, kissed him, told him she loved him. He found himself analyzing her every word, every gesture, looking for signs of the manipulative woman he'd seen in those videos. You're quiet tonight, Shannon said one evening, curling up next to him on the couch. Everything okay at work? Alfonso plastered on a smile. Just tired. Big project coming up. Shannon frowned, concern in her eyes. You're working too hard, honey. Maybe we should take a vacation soon. Just the two of us. The thought made Alfonso's stomach turn. Maybe, he said noncommittally. Let's see how this project goes first. At work, he struggled to focus, jumping every time his phone buzzed with a potential update from Sylvia. His colleagues noticed the change in him. Manning, are you sure you're okay? Jake asked one day, genuine concern in his voice. You've been off for weeks now. Alfonso sighed, rubbing his eyes. Just some personal stuff. I'll be fine. Jake looked like he wanted to say more. But just then, Alfonso's phone buzzed. A text from Sylvia. We need to talk. Same cafe, 1 hour. Alfonso's heart raced. This was it. Sorry, Jake, he said, standing up abruptly. I've got to go. Family emergency. An hour later, he sat across from Sylvia, his hands clenched around a cup of coffee he hadn't touched. It's worse than we thought, Alfonso, she said without preamble as soon as he sat down. Her face was grim, her usual professional detachment cracking slightly. This special group? It's a sophisticated cult-like organization. They target influential and wealthy individuals for marriage and affairs. Alfonso felt the blood drain from his face. What's their endgame? Sylvia's voice was low, her eyes darting around to make sure no one was listening. Blackmail, primarily. They use these relationships to force their targets into joining or financing their operations. But that's not all. She paused, meeting Alfonso's eyes. They're involved in large-scale money laundering, identity theft, even human trafficking. And they've got their hooks deep into city government and law enforcement. Alfonso's mind raced, piecing together the implications. The influential men in the videos, a city councilman, a CEO, a prominent philanthropist, all perfect targets. So Shannon is a key player, Sylvia finished. I'm sorry, Alfonso, but your wife is at the heart of this organization. From what I've been able to uncover, she's one of their top recruiters. Alfonso felt like he'd been punched in the gut. He'd known it was bad, but this was beyond anything he'd imagined. How? How long has this been going on? Sylvia shook her head. It's hard to say for certain. This group is good at covering their tracks. But from what I've pieced together, Shannon's been involved for at least 3 years. 3 years. Half their marriage. Alfonso's world tilted on its axis. What do I do now, Sylvia? I can't just go home and pretend everything's normal. Not knowing this, Sylvia leaned forward, her voice urgent. You have to, Alfonso. At least for a little while longer. This organization is dangerous. If they suspect you know anything, your life could be in danger. She paused, considering. There's a charity gala coming up next month. A lot of the city's elite will be there, including several people I've identified as likely members of this group. If we're going to expose them, that might be our best chance. Alfonso nodded slowly, his mind already working on a plan. I'll need your help, Sylvia. We'll only get one shot at this. You've got it, Sylvia replied without hesitation. Whatever you need. As they parted ways, Alfonso felt a strange mix of emotions. Horror at what he'd learned, fear for what lay ahead, but also a grim determination. He'd dedicated his life to protecting people. Now, he had the chance to take down an organization that had hurt countless individuals, including him. He squared his shoulders as he walked back to his office. It was time to start planning. The weeks leading up to the charity gala were a blur of careful planning and sleepless nights for Alfonso. Every moment at home felt like a performance, each interaction with Shannon a dangerous dance where one misstep could give everything away. Are you excited about the gala? Shannon asked one evening as they got ready for bed. Her voice was light, but Alfonso caught the calculating look in her eyes. He forced a smile. Of course. It's always a good time. You? Shannon's answering smile sent chills down his spine. Oh, absolutely. I have a feeling this year's event will be memorable. If only she knew. Finally, the night of the gala arrived. Alfonso stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his bow tie. The invitation lay on the dresser, a gilded reminder of the night ahead. Shannon emerged from the bathroom, resplendent in a shimmering gown that hugged her curves. You look handsome, she smiled, kissing his cheek. Alfonso fought the urge to recoil, to wipe away the touch of her lips. Thanks, he managed, his voice steady despite the turmoil within. You look beautiful. As they drove to the gala, Alfonso's mind raced. Everything was in place. Weeks of careful planning, of late-night meetings with Sylvia, of calling in favors and making discreet inquiries, would come to fruition tonight. The ballroom was a sea of glittering dresses and crisp tuxedos. Alfonso scanned the crowd, recognizing faces from Shannon's videos. William Caldwell holding court near the bar, his wife oblivious at his side. Gordon Avery laughing with a group of executives, his hand possessively on the small of his assistant's back. Terrence Navarro charming a cluster of socialites, his eyes constantly darting to Shannon. I'm going to mingle, Shannon whispered, squeezing his arm before disappearing into the crowd. Alfonso watched her go, noting how she immediately gravitated towards a group of men he didn't recognize. More potential recruits, no doubt. Taking a deep breath, Alfonso made his way to the audiovisual control room. He flashed a fake ID to the young technician at the door. Last-minute changes to the presentation, he explained smoothly. The technician nodded, stepping aside without question. Once inside, Alfonso worked quickly, inserting a flash drive and uploading his carefully edited video. His heart pounded as he set the timer. In just 15 minutes, everything would change. Returning to the ballroom, he grabbed a champagne flute, forcing himself to make small talk as the minutes ticked by. He caught sight of Shannon across the room, her head bent close to William Caldwell's as they spoke in hushed tones. Suddenly, the lights dimmed. Conversation stuttered to a halt as all eyes turned to the large screen at the front of the room. Alfonso's palms were sweating as the video began to play. Gasps echoed through the room as Shannon appeared on screen, in compromising situations with William, Gordon, and Terrence. The footage was carefully cut to hint at the cult's illegal activities without revealing the full extent of Alfonso's knowledge. What the hell is this? William Caldwell's voice cut through the shocked silence. He knocked over a waiter in his haste to leave, champagne spilling across the marble floor. Gordon Avery turned an alarming shade of red, loosening his collar as he stammered excuses to the people around him. This is clearly some kind of sick joke. Terence Navarro simply stood, mouth agape, as his wife screamed at him. How could you? With your own cousin? Chaos erupted. People were shouting, demanding explanations. Some were frantically making phone calls, while others rushed for the exits. In the midst of the pandemonium, Alfonso calmly approached Shannon. Her face was a mask of shock and fury as she whirled to face him. "How dare you?" she began, her voice shaking with rage. Alfonso cut her off, his voice cold. "Save it, Shannon." He pulled out an envelope from his jacket. "Divorce papers. I suggest you read them carefully." Shannon's eyes widened as she realized the full implications of what was happening. "Alfonso, you don't understand," she said, her voice taking on the honeyed tone he'd heard her use in the videos. "This isn't what it looks like. If you'll just let me explain." Alfonso held up a hand, cutting her off. "I understand perfectly, Shannon. I've seen the videos. All of them." Shannon's face paled, the mask of charm slipping for a moment. "You went through my things?" she hissed, anger flashing in her eyes. "I found them by accident," Alfonso replied, his voice steady. "But that's not important now. What matters is that I know about your special group. I know what you've been doing, who you've been manipulating." Shannon's eyes darted around the room, taking in the chaos unfolding around them. William Caldwell was being confronted by his wife, while Gordon Avery was frantically tapping at his phone, likely calling his lawyer. Terence Navarro had disappeared entirely. "You have no idea what you've done," Shannon said, her voice low and dangerous. "This is bigger than you could possibly understand." Alfonso stood his ground. "I understand enough. It's over, Shannon. For you, for this organization, for all of it." Just then, a commotion near the entrance caught their attention. Several police officers were entering the ballroom, led by a woman Alfonso recognized as the chief of police. Shannon's face twisted into a sneer. "You think this will stop us? You have no idea how deep this goes, Alfonso. We have people everywhere." "Maybe," Alfonso conceded. "But after tonight, everyone will be watching. Your secrets are out in the open now." He turned to walk away, but Shannon grabbed his arm, her nails digging into his skin. "Don't you walk away from me," she snarled. "You have no idea what I'm capable of." Alfonso gently but firmly removed her hand. "I think I have a pretty good idea now," he said softly. "Goodbye, Shannon." As he walked away, leaving Shannon standing alone in the middle of the unraveling chaos she had helped create, Alfonso felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The facade had crumbled. The real battle was just beginning, but for the first time in weeks, he felt hope. He made his way through the crowded ballroom, nodding to Sylvia, who was discreetly observing from a corner. Their eyes met briefly, a silent acknowledgement of a job well done. Outside, the cool night air hit Alfonso's face, and he took a deep breath. The sounds of sirens approaching in the distance mixed with the muffled chaos still emanating from the ballroom behind him. As he loosened his bow tie, Alfonso allowed himself a small smile. It wasn't over, not by a long shot. But tonight, they had struck a significant blow against a dangerous organization. And for now, that was enough. He hailed a taxi, ready to head home and prepare for whatever challenges the coming days would bring. As the car pulled away from the curb, Alfonso watched the glittering lights of the gala venue recede in the rearview mirror, symbolically leaving behind the life he had known and stepping into an uncertain but potentially brighter future. The morning after the charity gala, Alfonso Manning woke to a cacophony of ringing phones and buzzing notifications. His head throbbed, a reminder of the stress and adrenaline from the night before. He squinted at his phone's bright screen, seeing a flood of missed calls and messages. The events of last night came rushing back, and a mixture of relief and dread settled in his stomach. A text from Sylvia Rodriguez caught his eye. "Turn on the news. Now." Alfonso fumbled for the remote and flicked on the television. The anchorwoman's voice filled the room, her tone grave. "Breaking news this morning as several high-profile arrests have been made following last night's charity gala scandal. Among those taken into custody is Shannon Manning, wife of security consultant Alfonso Manning, Alfonso watched, a surreal feeling washing over him as footage from last night played across the screen. Clips of Shannon being led away in handcuffs, William Caldwell trying to shield his face from reporters, Gordon Avery being escorted out of his office building. His phone buzzed again. This time, it was Detective Sarah Chen. "Mr. Manning, we need to talk. Can you come to the station?" Within an hour, Alfonso found himself sitting across from Detective Chen in a small, windowless room at the police station. The detective's dark eyes scrutinized him over a steaming cup of coffee. "Mr. Manning," she began, her voice cool and professional. "I understand you have information about this organization your wife was involved with?" Alfonso nodded, leaning forward. "More than information, detective. I have evidence. Videos, recorded conversations, financial records that Sylvia, Ms. Rodriguez, helped me obtain." Detective Chen's eyebrow arched slightly at the mention of Sylvia's name. "Start from the beginning, Mr. Manning, and don't leave anything out." For the next several hours, Alfonso recounted everything. From finding the hidden DVDs to his collaboration with Sylvia, to the carefully orchestrated exposure at the gala. Detective Chen listened intently, occasionally interrupting to ask for clarification or more details. As Alfonso finished his account, Detective Chen sat back, tapping her pen against her legal pad. "Mr. Manning, I'm going to be frank with you. What you've uncovered, it's big. Bigger than you probably realize. This organization has tentacles reaching into every level of our city's infrastructure." Alfonso felt a chill run down his spine. "What does that mean for the investigation?" Detective Chen's lips thinned into a grim line. "It means we have to tread very carefully. There are people involved in this who have the power to make evidence disappear, to discredit witnesses, to shut down entire investigations. So what do we do?" Alfonso asked, frustration creeping into his voice. "We build an airtight case," Detective Chen replied. "And we do it quietly. I'm putting together a task force of officers I trust implicitly. We'll need your continued cooperation, Mr. Manning. Are you prepared for that?" Alfonso nodded without hesitation. "Whatever it takes, detective. I want to see this through to the end." Over the next few weeks, Alfonso found himself in a whirlwind of legal proceedings, interviews with prosecutors, and clandestine meetings with Detective Chen's task force. He watched as the case against Shannon and the other arrested cult members began to take shape. But even as progress was made, Alfonso could sense the pushback. One afternoon, he sat in on a witness interview that went sideways. "I'm sorry," the witness, a former employee of Gordon Avery, said nervously. I think I may have been mistaken in my earlier statement. My memory of events isn't as clear as I thought." Detective Chen's face remained impassive, but Alfonso could see the frustration in her eyes. As soon as the witness left, she turned to him. "This is the third witness this week to suddenly develop amnesia. They're getting to people, Alfonso. We need to move faster." The stress began to take its toll on Alfonso. Nightmares plagued his sleep, filled with shadowy figures and Shannon's accusing eyes. During the day, he found himself constantly looking over his shoulder, jumping at every unexpected sound. At Sylvia's insistence, he started seeing a therapist, Dr. Ramirez. "It's normal to feel overwhelmed, Alfonso," Dr. Ramirez said during one of their sessions. "You've been through a traumatic experience, and the danger isn't over yet. But remember, you're not alone in this." Alfonso nodded. "I know. It's just, I keep thinking about Shannon. How could I have been so blind? How did I not see what was happening right under my nose?" Dr. Ramirez leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. "Alfonso, master manipulators like Shannon and this organization, they're experts at hiding their true nature. You can't blame yourself for their actions." Taking her words to heart, Alfonso made a conscious effort to strengthen his relationships with trusted friends and colleagues. He found solace in their support, drawing strength from their unwavering belief in him. One evening, as he was having dinner with Sylvia and a few close friends, his phone buzzed with a message from Detective Chen. "We've got a problem. Meet me at the usual place in an hour." Alfonso felt his stomach drop. He made his excuses and left, his mind racing with possibilities. What new obstacle were they facing now? Months passed, and the legal battles raged on. Alfonso had settled into a new routine, dividing his time between his work at Elite Guard Solutions and assisting with the ongoing investigation. But the constant pressure was wearing on him. One evening, as Alfonso was leaving work late, he noticed something off about his car. The security system light was blinking irregularly. Years of training had taught him to trust his instincts, and right now, they were screaming that something was wrong. As he approached his vehicle cautiously, a man stepped out of the shadows. "Mr. Manning," the stranger said, his voice devoid of emotion. "I have a message for you." Alfonso tensed, ready for a confrontation. "Who are you? What do you want?" The man held out an envelope. "An invitation, Mr. Manning. My employers would like to have a word with you. I suggest you accept." Alfonso's mind raced. This had to be the cult. But why now? Why like this? "And if I refuse?" he asked, already suspecting the answer. The man's expression didn't change. "That would be unwise. There's a car waiting. I suggest you get in. Refusing or contacting the police will have dire consequences." Alfonso weighed his options quickly. Running or calling for help seemed futile and potentially dangerous. The smartest move was to play along, to see where this led. As he followed the man to a waiting car, Alfonso discreetly activated the burner phone hidden in a secret pocket of his jacket, a precaution Sylvia had insisted on weeks earlier. He sent out a prearranged distress signal, hoping Sylvia would understand its significance. The car ride was long and winding. Alfonso tried to keep track of their route, but after a series of seemingly random turns, he found himself thoroughly disoriented. The man who had delivered the invitation sat beside him, silent and still as a statue. "Where are we going?" Alfonso asked, breaking the tense silence. The man didn't even turn his head. "You'll see soon enough, Mr. Manning. Patience is a virtue." Alfonso fought the urge to laugh hysterically. Patience? When he was being kidnapped by a dangerous cult. But he kept his composure, his mind working furiously to prepare for whatever lay ahead. After what felt like hours, the car came to a stop. Alfonso peered out the window, taking in their destination with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Before them stood the Starlight Hotel, a once grand building now fallen into disrepair. Its windows were boarded up, and the faded sign hung crookedly above the entrance. "Charming place," Alfonso muttered as he was led out of the car. The man ignored his comment, guiding him through the dilapidated lobby and up a creaking staircase. The musty smell of neglect filled his nostrils as they made their way down a dimly lit corridor. Finally, they stopped in front of a set of double doors. The man knocked twice, then stepped aside as the doors swung open. Alfonso found himself in what must have once been the hotel's ballroom. A long table dominated the center of the room, surrounded by high-backed chairs. And at the head of the table sat a man Alfonso had only seen in photographs and surveillance footage. Sammy Watkins, the charismatic and ruthless leader of the cult. "Mr. Manning," Watkins said, his voice smooth as silk. "We meet at last. Please, have a seat." Alfonso remained standing, his eyes scanning the room. He recognized several faces from the charity gala, men and women who had managed to evade arrest. They watched him with a mixture of curiosity and hostility. "I'll stand, thanks," Alfonso replied, keeping his voice steady. "What's this about, Watkins?" Watkins' smile never wavered. "Straight to business, I see. Very well." He leaned forward, steepling his fingers. "You've caused us quite a bit of trouble, Mr. Manning, but I'm a reasonable man. I believe we can come to an arrangement." "An arrangement?" Alfonso echoed, his tone skeptical. "Yes," Watkins nodded. "This investigation of yours is becoming quite inconvenient. We want you to use your influence to halt it. And of course, we'll need you to assist in Shannon's release." Alfonso felt a surge of anger. "You can't be serious." Watkins' eyes hardened. "Oh, I assure you, Mr. Manning, I'm quite serious. You have more influence than you realize. A word from you expressing doubt about the evidence, suggesting that perhaps things aren't as clear-cut as they seemed. It could go a long way. And why would I do that?" Alfonso asked, though he already knew the answer. "Because, Mr. Manning," Watkins replied, his voice taking on a dangerous edge, "if you don't, there will be consequences. Your career, your safety, the lives of your loved ones. All of it hangs in the balance. We have reach you can't even begin to imagine. Alfonso's mind raced. He needed time, needed to figure out a way out of this. I need to think about this, he said, trying to keep his voice neutral. Watkins nodded, as if he had expected this response. Of course, we're not unreasonable. Take some time to consider your options. We'll give you a moment to collect your thoughts. With a wave of his hand, Watkins dismissed the others from the room. As they filed out, Alfonso was left alone, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He paced the room, his mind working furiously. He knew he couldn't give in to their demands, but outright refusal would likely get him killed. He needed a plan. As he moved around the room, Alfonso's security training kicked in. He noted potential escape routes, items that could be used as weapons. And then he saw it, a small air vent near the floor, partially hidden behind a heavy curtain. Moving as quietly as he could, Alfonso made his way to the vent. It was small, but he thought he might be able to squeeze through. Using a pin from his pocket, he began working on the screws holding the vent cover in place. Come on, he muttered under his breath as he worked on the stubborn screws. Just as he managed to loosen the last screw, he heard footsteps approaching. Quickly, he moved away from the vent, his mind racing. He had a way out now, but leaving might mean losing the opportunity to gather crucial evidence against the cult. As the footsteps grew closer, Alfonso made his decision. He would stay, for now. He had a chance to gather information that could be vital to bringing down the cult once and for all. It was a risk, but one he was willing to take. The door handle turned, and Alfonso steeled himself for what was to come. Whatever happened next, he was determined to see this through to the end. He took a deep breath, centering himself. Years of security work had prepared him for high-stress situations. But this was on another level entirely. Alfonso Manning stood in the dimly lit room of the abandoned Starlight Hotel, his mind racing. He had freed himself from his restraints, but the real challenge lay ahead. The air was thick with dust and tension, and every creak of the old building set his nerves on edge. He pressed his ear against the door, straining to hear any movement outside. Nothing. The cult members had left him alone, probably to let the weight of their threats sink in. Little did they know, Alfonso had no intention of giving in. As he contemplated his next move, a faint sound caught his attention. At first, he thought it was just the old hotel settling, but then he heard it again. Voices, muffled shouts, the unmistakable sound of running feet. Alfonso's heart rate spiked. Had Sylvia received his distress signal? Was help on the way? Or was this something else entirely? He didn't have long to wonder. Suddenly, the relative quiet of the hotel was shattered by the sound of splintering wood and shouted commands. NYPD. Freeze. The cult members, caught off guard, began to retaliate. The crack of gunfire echoed through the corridors, and Alfonso instinctively dropped to the floor, his security training kicking in. Outside his room, chaos reigned. He could hear the sounds of struggle, of bodies hitting walls, of orders being barked and ignored. Alfonso knew he had to act fast. He scanned the room once more, his eyes landing on a heavy brass lamp. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. He grabbed it, hefting its weight in his hand as he approached the door. Taking a deep breath, Alfonso turned the handle. The door swung open to reveal a scene of utter mayhem. Cult members and police officers were engaged in hand-to-hand combat up and down the corridor. The air was thick with gunpowder and tension. Alfonso barely had time to take it all in before a cult member noticed him and charged. Without hesitation, Alfonso swung the lamp, catching the man square in the jaw. He went down hard, and Alfonso quickly relieved him of his weapon. Now armed, Alfonso moved swiftly down the corridor, his eyes scanning for familiar faces. He rounded a corner and nearly collided with Sylvia Rodriguez. "Alfonso!" she exclaimed, her face a mixture of relief and determination. "Thank God you're all right. We need to move now." "Sylvia, how did you—" She cut him off with a wave of her hand. "No time. Watkins is trying to escape. He's got a briefcase full of documents. Could be everything we need to bring this whole operation down." Alfonso nodded, his jaw set. Where? Last seen heading for the roof. Come on. They raced through the hotel, dodging debris and ducking under the swing of a cult member's fist. Alfonso's world narrowed to a pinpoint focus. Find Watkins, secure the documents, end this once and for all. As they climbed the stairs to the roof, Alfonso caught a glimpse of a figure disappearing through a door. There, he shouted to Sylvia. I'm going after him. Cover me. Without waiting for a response, Alfonso burst through the door onto the roof. The cool night air hit him like a slap, a stark contrast to the stuffy interior of the hotel. And there, silhouetted against the city skyline, was Sammy Watkins. Sammy Watkins stood at the edge of the roof, his expensive suit rumpled, his usually perfectly coiffed hair in disarray. In one hand, he clutched a briefcase. In the other, a gun. It's over, Watkins, Alfonso called out, his own weapon trained on the cult leader. There's nowhere left to run. Watkins turned, his face a mask of contempt. Oh, Mr. Manning, always the Boy Scout, aren't you? You have no idea what you're dealing with. I think I have a pretty good idea, Alfonso replied, taking a cautious step forward. Money laundering, identity theft, human trafficking. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, isn't it? Watkins' laugh was hollow. You think you've won? This is bigger than you, bigger than all of us. You can't stop what's coming. Maybe not, Alfonso conceded. But I can stop you. What happened next was a blur of motion. Watkins raised his gun, but Alfonso was faster. He tackled the cult leader, sending them both sprawling across the rooftop. The briefcase skittered away, teetering dangerously close to the edge. They grappled, each man fighting for control. Watkins was stronger than he looked, his desperation lending him strength. He landed a solid punch to Alfonso's jaw, momentarily stunning him. Watkins scrambled to his feet, lunging for the briefcase. Alfonso, shaking off the blow, launched himself forward, catching Watkins around the ankles. They both went down hard, rolling perilously close to the roof's edge. The gun had been lost in the scuffle, but that didn't stop Watkins. He fought like a cornered animal, all pretense of civility gone. His elbow caught Alfonso in the ribs, driving the air from his lungs. For a moment, Alfonso faltered. Watkins seized the opportunity, shoving hard. Alfonso felt himself sliding, the rough concrete of the roof scraping against his back. And then, suddenly, there was nothing beneath him but air. Time seemed to slow. Alfonso could see the street far below, could hear Sylvia's shout of alarm. His hand shot out, grasping desperately for anything to stop his fall. His fingers caught the edge of the roof, and he hung there, suspended between life and death. Watkins' face appeared above him, a mixture of triumph and madness in his eyes. "Goodbye, Mr. Manning," he sneered, raising his foot to stamp on Alfonso's fingers. But Alfonso wasn't done yet. With a surge of adrenaline, he swung his other hand up, catching Watkins by the ankle. The cult leader's eyes widened in shock as he lost his balance, tipping forward over the edge of the roof. In that moment, Alfonso had a choice. He could let Watkins fall, ending the threat once and for all. It would be so easy. Just let go. But that wasn't who Alfonso was. With a grunt of effort, he tightened his grip on Watkins' ankle, even as his other hand began to slip from the roof's edge. "Sylvia," he shouted. "A little help here." Sylvia appeared at the edge of the roof, her eyes widening as she took in the scene. Without hesitation, she grabbed Alfonso's arm, bracing herself against the roof's edge. Together, they hauled both Alfonso and Watkins back onto solid ground. Watkins collapsed, the fight gone out of him. Alfonso, breathing heavily, secured the cult leader's hands behind his back with his own tie. You saved me," Watkins panted, disbelief evident in his voice. "Why?" Alfonso met his gaze steadily. "Because that's what the good guys do, Watkins. We're better than you. And now, you're going to face justice for everything you've done." As if on cue, the roof door burst open. Detective Chen and her team poured out, weapons at the ready. They quickly took control of the situation, securing Watkins and retrieving the briefcase. Detective Chen approached Alfonso, a rare smile on her face. "Good work, Manning. We got them. All of them." Alfonso nodded, the adrenaline beginning to fade, leaving him feeling drained. The documents? Safe, Chun confirmed. And from what we've seen so far, it's everything we need to bring this whole organization down. As the police led Watkins away, Alfonso felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned to find Sylvia standing there, concern etched on her face. "You okay?" she asked softly. Alfonso took a deep breath, looking out over the city skyline. The first hints of dawn were beginning to lighten the eastern sky. "Yeah," he said finally. "I think I am." The weeks following the takedown of the cult were a whirlwind of activity. Alfonso found himself at the center of a storm of legal proceedings, debriefings, and media attention. The documents recovered from Watkins had indeed proven to be a treasure trove of information, exposing the full extent of the cult's influence. Alfonso sat in Detective Chen's office, watching as she pinned yet another photo to the evidence board. The faces of corrupt officials, business leaders, and even fellow law enforcement officers stared back at him. "It's staggering," Chen said, stepping back to survey the board. "We're looking at the biggest corruption scandal this city has ever seen." Alfonso nodded, feeling a mix of satisfaction and weariness. "How many arrests so far?" 73 as of this morning, Chen replied. "And we're not done yet. Every day, we're uncovering new connections, new crimes." As they discussed the ongoing investigation, Alfonso couldn't help but think of Shannon. His ex-wife was facing a laundry list of charges, her trial set to begin in a few months. The woman he had loved, the life they had shared, it all seemed like a distant dream now. Sean seemed to read his thoughts. "You did the right thing, Manning. Never doubt that." Alfonso managed a small smile. "I know. It's a lot to process." As he left the police station, Alfonso was accosted by a group of reporters. Their questions came rapid fire, a barrage of inquiries about the cult, about Shannon, about his role in bringing it all down. "Mr. Manning, how does it feel to be hailed as a hero? What can you tell us about the ongoing investigation? Is it true that your ex-wife was a key player in the cult's operations?" Alfonso held up his hands, trying to fend off the onslaught. "No comment. Please, I just want to go home." He pushed through the crowd, escaping to the relative safety of his car. As he drove home, Alfonso couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The cult might be dismantled, but its effects lingered. At home, Alfonso poured himself a drink and sank into his armchair. The house felt empty, echoing with memories of a life that no longer existed. His phone buzzed, another message from a talk show wanting an exclusive interview. Alfonso ignored it. He had given one interview, a single, powerful statement about the dangers of such organizations and the importance of trust and integrity. That was enough. He had no desire to relive the ordeal over and over for the entertainment of others. Instead, he pulled out a notepad and began to write. Ideas flowed onto the paper, plans for a new consulting firm, specializing in personal and corporate security. He could use his experience to help others protect themselves from similar threats. As he worked, Alfonso felt a sense of purpose settling over him. The ordeal had left him wiser, more cautious, but also more appreciative of genuine relationships and his own resilience. Weeks turned into months. Alfonso's consulting firm, Phoenix Security, began to take shape. He hired carefully, building a team he could trust implicitly. Among his first employees was Sylvia Rodriguez, whose investigative skills had proven invaluable. One evening, as they were closing up the office, Sylvia paused at Alfonso's desk. "You know, when you first came to me with this case, I never imagined it would lead to all this." Alfonso leaned back in his chair, a wry smile on his face. "You and me both. Sometimes I still can't believe it's over." Sylvia perched on the edge of his desk. "Is it, though? Over, I mean." Alfonso considered her question. "The cult is finished. But the work? Helping people protect themselves, exposing corruption wherever we find it? That's never over." Sylvia nodded, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Well then, boss, what's our next move?" Before Alfonso could respond, his phone buzzed. It was a text from Detective Chen. "New case. Might be up your alley. Drinks later to discuss?" Alfonso showed the message to Sylvia, his eyebrow raised in a silent question. She grinned in response. I'll grab my coat. As they left the office, Alfonso felt a surge of anticipation. The future stretched out before him, full of possibilities. He had survived betrayal, faced down a dangerous cult, and come out the other side stronger for it. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Alfonso Manning was ready to face them head-on. The story concludes with Alfonso hosting a small gathering at his new office. Sylvia is there, along with Detective Chin and a few other close friends who had supported him through the ordeal. As they raise their glasses in a toast, Alfonso looks around the room, feeling a profound sense of gratitude. To new beginnings, he says, his voice steady and sure. The others echo his toast, their faces reflecting the same mix of determination and hope that Alfonso feels. As the conversation flows around him, Alfonso takes a moment to reflect on the journey that brought him here, from betrayal to justice, and finally, to peace. The road ahead might be uncertain, but Alfonso Manning was no longer afraid. He had found his purpose, his tribe, and himself. And that, he realized, was the greatest victory of all.
This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy the story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.
I find myself in a situation that I used to only see in YouTube videos about infidelity. I used to watch these videos for entertainment, never imagining that I'd be in a similar spot myself. It all began when I received an unusual envelope in the mail. What caught my attention was the absence of a return address, and it had 2 stamps in the upper right corner. The handwritten address made me think it might be from an old military buddy trying to reconnect. When I opened it, the letter was addressed to Mr. Unknown, which I'm using to replace my name. Here's what the letter said. Dear Mr. Unknown, I'm sending you this anonymous letter to let you know that your wife has been having an affair with Mr. Bossman, who is involved with multiple women. I read the letter multiple times. The author wanted to remain anonymous and wanted me to know that my wife was having an affair with her supervisor. The mention of multiple women likely meant that the supervisor was involved with more than one woman. I had seen her supervisor once when I dropped my wife off at work. He was a tall guy, around 6'4" or 6'5", bald, below average in looks, and out of shape, resembling a heavier golem. I knew my wife's type, and he didn't fit it. To give some context, during my time in the military, I focused on endurance training. But about 6 months before leaving, I decided to start lifting weights because I was tired of feeling fatigued during workouts. I gained 20 pounds of muscle. It may sound conceited, but my physical appearance improved significantly. However, at 5'9", I didn't consider myself a Don Juan. Nonetheless, with my new physique, I noticed a substantial increase in attention from women. They would check me out discreetly, and one of my wife's friends even subtly showed interest once. My wife, who was the jealous type, never seemed to notice any of this. As a religious person, I never took advantage of these opportunities or flaunted them to boost my ego. I didn't flirt or have affairs. It was just a confidence boost. My wife's only comment was, "If your neck disappears, you need to stop," which was a bit underwhelming but made me believe she loved me for who I was, not just my body. Returning to the letter, I took it with a grain of salt since there was no concrete evidence. Confronting my wife wouldn't help because if she denied it, what else could I do? I lacked evidence, and if there truly was an affair, confronting her without proof would drive it underground. Suspicion alone wasn't enough, as voicing my suspicions would make her think I didn't trust her. What if I was mistaken? Having solid evidence was crucial. Let me provide some background about us. I'm 35 years old, and my wife is 33. We met in college and got married shortly after. I also enlisted in the military, and during our time together, we had 3 kids, a 9-year-old boy and 2 girls aged 7 and 5. My wife was a stay-at-home mom, taking care of our 3 children. I'm confident that she remained faithful throughout my military service. We had a great group of friends who supported her when I was deployed. Contrary to the stereotype of cheating spouses during deployments, it's challenging to keep such things hidden, although it does happen. To cut a long story short, I was rarely at home during my last posting, and as I continued to advance in rank, it was only going to get worse. So, I decided to leave the military. After serving for 10 years, I made the choice to leave. Typically, this is a pivotal moment in a military career because it doesn't make financial sense to leave after this point. Military orders are typically at least 3 years, and retirement occurs after 20 years. I made this decision to start over in the corporate world from the bottom up, primarily to be a more present father for my children, as I hadn't spent much time with them before and had never changed a diaper. Regarding my decision to leave the military, my wife wasn't thrilled about it at all. In short, she doesn't handle uncertainty well and felt comfortable in the life we had built together in the military, despite her complaints about my frequent absences. Now that I'm no longer in the military, she presented me with a long list of demands regarding where we should live, how much money I needed to earn, and other factors to make her feel comfortable and ensure security for her and our kids. She cried a lot during this period. As everyone knows, you have to go where the job opportunities are, but I did my best to meet her criteria, and we were incredibly fortunate in the civilian world. I fulfilled all her requirements. I secured a job in the right state, within driving distance of my parents, who she loves. I'm earning what military personnel would consider a significant income, in the 6 figures. We're in an area with excellent public schools and low homeowner association fees, where everyone is polite. Oh, and did I mention that she had always complained about not being able to start her career because we moved so frequently in the military, which is true. She expressed her desire to utilize her degree in logistics and supply chain management. She began her job search, and within 3 months, she landed her dream job, if you can call it that. She works at a distribution center where all her colleagues are women, and they report to a male supervisor, the bald man I mentioned earlier. While her job doesn't pay much, it's the job she always wanted, and her first since graduating from college. I supported her 100% in pursuing this opportunity, as I do for everything she chooses to do, which she has since acknowledged. Since I received this letter, I've been trying to collect evidence to confirm its authenticity. If the person wanted to expose her boss, why didn't they report it to HR? Why tell me instead? Nonetheless, I kept a close eye on my wife. I knew her cell phone password, so I checked her messages, and I did find texts with her boss, but their conversations were pretty ordinary, and they didn't text much. That letter bothered me for almost a week, and I couldn't find any proof of my wife being unfaithful. She's been at her job for 5 months now, and the only noticeable change is that our intimacy has decreased. She's been turning down Zex for the past 2 months, but I can't accuse her of cheating just because she's not in the mood. She always has excuses like her job becoming more stressful or her feeling tired. Despite searching for evidence for 2 weeks, I came up empty-handed, but I remained vigilant for any hints. I often wondered about the sender of that letter and considered it might be a prank. At one point, I almost mentioned it to my wife as a joke, but I decided against it. I was about to close that strange chapter and accept that our intimacy wouldn't be as frequent as before. However, one night, my wife talked about her job and mentioned how her female coworkers were jealous of the attention she was getting from her boss. She said they envied her because she had received the best quarterly reviews and been recognized as the Employee of the Month 3 times already, despite her relatively short time there. She was genuinely excited about the recognition, and initially, I was happy for her since she hadn't experienced a real job before. But that letter kept coming back to my mind. For some reason, her statement sparked my curiosity. I wondered, could it be that one of her coworkers is so jealous that they sent me that letter? And more importantly, why were they so envious of her recognition? While it's common for women to be jealous of each other, this seemed a bit extreme. I became suspicious again and considered hiring a private investigator to track my wife. However, I changed my mind at the last minute because I didn't want to waste money in case I was wrong. After all, I didn't have any strong evidence or a valid reason to be suspicious. There were no incriminating text messages, just that mysterious letter, her reduced interest in intimacy, and her newfound enthusiasm for her job. It all seemed pretty normal, right? So, I decided to purchase a GPS tracker online to install in her car and monitor any unusual places she might go. The GPS tracker I bought was the type that easily fits into the OBDI port beneath the steering column. I was nervous because it's quite visible, but my wife isn't very tech-savvy. I figured I could easily come up with an excuse if she happened to notice it, especially since I often handle car maintenance. I could just tell her it's related to a fuse or something, and she'd believe me. I wouldn't really recommend this kind of GPS tracker for any covert operation like the one I was about to undertake. It was a Friday, and I was eager to see what the GPS would reveal. At lunchtime, I noticed her car was parked in an unfamiliar location. It wasn't her workplace, the grocery store, or our kids' school. It was on the other side of town, a place we rarely visited. I decided to Google the location and discovered it was a hotel. I immediately requested permission from my boss to leave work and headed towards the GPS location, which was about 35 miles away from my job. When I was about 25 miles into the drive, with only 10 miles left to reach the location, I noticed the GPS signal was moving away from that spot. I was tracking the signal using an app on my phone. I sped up, but I could see the GPS signal heading back towards her workplace. Her car had been at that location for around 3 hours, and I had just missed her. I felt so disappointed. I got out of my car and looked around the area, trying to figure out if her car was parked at a Best Western hotel or the nearby restaurant. Another thought crossed my mind. Maybe she was out eating with her coworkers because the restaurant and hotel were next to each other. But it seemed strange for her to travel this far just for a restaurant when there were plenty of options between her workplace and that location. It's not like she was a big fan of Golden Corral, willing to drive 27 miles for a meal. That day, I returned home with numerous questions but no answers. My wife noticed that something was bothering me when I got home, but I lied and told her I had a tough day at work. I made an effort not to confront her, but I still felt like I lacked sufficient evidence to do so. Consequently, I decided it was time to hire a private investigator because I couldn't keep checking my phone and leaving work to track her down and catch her cheating. On Saturday, I spoke with a private investigator who charged $25 an hour. He wasn't a licensed investigator, but rather a person with a good camera phone whom I found on Craigslist. I agreed to pay him to follow my wife during her lunch hours. His services weren't too expensive since he only worked during those hours. The private investigator also installed a GPS tracking app on his phone, allowing him to see what I could see. I informed him about the incident involving the Best Western and Golden Corral and showed him the location. Monday through Thursday passed without any noteworthy events. Everything was routine. Then on Friday, the private investigator alerted me to some movement. He texted me that my wife was driving toward the location of the Best Western, and he was tailing her. I opened the app to confirm his report. Since he knew her destination, he went ahead of her and arrived there before her. When my wife got there, she went alone into the hotel. The private investigator took photos of her entering the hotel and followed her inside. He was also aware of her boss, as I had described him, so he knew what he looked like in the car he drove. The private investigator sat in the hotel lobby and discreetly recorded my wife entering the elevator. He managed to join her in the elevator, which was a risky move as it could have blown his cover if she had seen him multiple times and recognized him. I suppose you get what you pay for. The private investigator noticed that she got off the elevator on the 3rd floor and recorded everything. He didn't follow her out of the elevator on the 3rd floor, but returned to the lobby and waited. About 3 hours later, he saw her boss exit the elevator, go to the front desk, check out of the hotel, and head to his car. He recorded the entire sequence. 10 minutes later, my wife emerged from the elevator, went directly to her car, and the private investigator captured this on tape as well. My suspicions were confirmed. She was cheating on me with that bald guy. I now had all the evidence I needed to confront her. The private investigator sent me all the recordings and pictures to my Dropbox. I compiled them into one video and came home early before she did, with my laptop and the envelope I mentioned earlier in my post. If you were to inquire about my feelings at that moment, I would say I felt surprisingly calm because I had been mentally preparing myself for this exact situation. When she returned home, I summoned her to the kitchen. My laptop was on the countertop, where I had compiled the recordings into a 30-minute video that showcased her arrival at the hotel, exiting the elevator, and her boss emerging shortly after, followed by her. I presented the video to her, and within less than 2 minutes of watching, she fully comprehended its content. She turned to me with an apologetic expression and uttered, "I can explain." Tears welled up in her eyes as she repeated, "I'm sorry." I silenced her and pointed at the screen, urging her to keep watching. Despite her attempts to turn around and explain herself, even attempting to get me to stop the video, my anger grew, and I grabbed her by the back of her hair, forcing her to face the laptop. I pointed at the screen and harshly told her to keep watching, you know what you did, as she cried softly and continued to watch. I held her hair throughout the entire video, and she continued to sob and tremble. I could tell from the fear in her eyes that she was terrified of me, as she had never seen me this furious before. I must clarify that I am not a violent person, and I had never laid a hand on her or any other woman in such a manner before. However, I made an exception on that particular day. After we finished watching the video, I forcefully pushed her to the floor, causing her to fly across the room. I had a strong urge to physically harm her, and I yelled at her, accusing her of sleeping with her boss just 5 months into her new job, and who knows how many others. She responded through tears, claiming it was the only time she had cheated. I asked her how long it had been going on, and she confessed that it had been 2 months. She stated that she didn't care about him. The sexual encounter meant nothing to her, and she couldn't explain why she had done it. I yelled at her, demanding that she start talking, or I would resort to violence. She confessed to everything, admitting that she wasn't genuinely attracted to him, but because other women were interested in him, she wanted him too, almost like it was a competition. I believe it had to do with him being the male boss in a predominantly female workplace. According to her, he was involved with other women as well. I couldn't comprehend how my once beautiful wife was involved with this guy who resembled Gollum. She was doing so merely because other women were interested in or already involved with him. It seemed like she had forgotten that she was married while engaging with this guy and denying her husband intimacy. What kind of world were we living in? It appeared that she was with him more out of competition than anything else. I was extremely upset, and words couldn't express it. I felt like my previously pristine image of my wife had been tarnished. That night, I called her derogatory names and told her I didn't want to see her again. I kicked her out of the house because I couldn't stand the sight of her, and she went to stay with a friend. That night was incredibly stressful because I had to feed and put my kids to bed, and I didn't know where anything was in the house. I was running around like a headless chicken, trying to resist calling my wife because my 5-year-old was crying. My wife had always been the stay-at-home mom and more involved in my kids' lives than I was. I was the breadwinner, and she was the homemaker. I thought we made a great team until now. She had destroyed everything because she was trying to compete with other women, disregarding the fact that she was married. She displayed very immature behavior. According to her, the female employees working under this guy, Gollum, were throwing themselves at him, even those who were married. It was a competition among grown women, married women, which was baffling to me. Grown women were acting like college girls, and I suspected that one of these women might have sent me that letter. Why would grown women compete to be involved with an unattractive, troll-like man? This guy disgusted me, taking advantage of his female employees and turning their workplace into a disgraceful mess. I want to get a divorce, and I want her to suffer the consequences of this betrayal. However, I had relied on her to maintain our home, so it would undoubtedly take some adjustment. My unfaithful wife has been texting and calling me since yesterday, seeking permission to return home. I didn't get much sleep last night, and I have to go to work this morning. She knows where everything our kids need, including their medication, is kept. My 7-year-old daughter requires special attention due to allergies and being selective about things, which my wife is good at handling. My 5-year-old daughter can also be challenging to take care of. I dropped my kids off at school and left work early to pick them up. It wasn't as bad as I expected, but I was quite tired. During this time, I haven't been responding to my wife's texts or calls. That evening, I called her back and told her to come home. When she arrived that night, it surprised me because she came with her older sister, perhaps out of fear of being alone with me. Her sister lives 90 miles away from us. My wife must have confided in her about her infidelity and sought her support. My sister-in-law, married young, is now divorced and bears a striking resemblance to my wife. They could be mistaken for twins, but she's 2 years older, and we've always gotten along well. She's more knowledgeable and respectful compared to my wife. My sister-in-law and I have had a good relationship for as long as we've known each other. My wife is the spoiled one in the family, and her older sister often has to clean up her messes. While I wasn't in the mood for reconciliation or playing nice with my wife, I was glad to see a friendly face. Even though I thought my sister-in-law would always be behind her sister, family bonds are strong. I appreciated her coming to mediate for my wayward wife, as she could relate to what I was going through due to her own experience with her husband's infidelity, which led to their divorce. My sister-in-law took me aside and explained that she wasn't there for my wayward wife, but for the sake of the kids. She acknowledged that my wife could be immature and suggested that, for the children's well-being, I should allow my wife back into the house. We could try an in-house separation and see how things develop from there. After our conversation, I have to admit that my sister-in-law has a way with words because she managed to calm me down enough to tolerate my wayward wife's presence. I glanced at my wife, who was sitting in the corner with a red face and swollen eyelids, as if she had been crying for days, trying to avoid making eye contact with me. It gave me some satisfaction that she understood the impact of her betrayal on me. When my kids emerged from their room and welcomed her, it eased the tense atmosphere and warmed my heart. I truly wish she hadn't betrayed me and had remained faithful. Seeing her with my kids was something I cherished because she was an excellent mother, but not so great as a wife. We lived in a 3-bedroom apartment, so my wayward wife and her sister shared the guest bedroom, while the kids stayed in the 3rd bedroom. My wayward wife came out of the bedroom after putting my kids to bed and began cooking dinner, while I sat on the living room couch with my sister-in-law watching TV. As my sister-in-law started talking to me, I could sense her intention. She was trying to divert my attention from my wife's affair or make everything seem normal. Deep down, I wanted things to return to normal, to go back to the way they used to be. I was tired of being angry and exhausted, taking care of the kids alone and handling my job without my wayward wife. I needed a distraction, and her sister was quite chatty. While my wayward wife was in the kitchen, my sister-in-law mentioned that she would leave the next morning, but would stay longer if needed. I told her that I was likely going to get a divorce because I couldn't look at my wife the same way or trust her anymore. My sister-in-law understood and didn't try to persuade me otherwise. After my wife finished cooking dinner, she served both of us without making eye contact or saying a word. The next morning, my sister-in-law departed, and we continued with our daily routine. I still wasn't speaking to my wayward wife, and she didn't seem to be getting ready for work that day, but I didn't inquire about it. In the afternoon, I consulted a divorce lawyer to explore my options. The lawyer mentioned that based on my wife's income, I might have to pay alimony and child support. It seemed absurd because she was only earning $45,000 a year, and she had cheated with her boss. Cheating with a superior, especially when in a committed relationship, is never acceptable. Perhaps her newfound financial independence, as it was her first job since college, had played a role in her actions. However, she had clearly taken it too far. I didn't have an issue with providing alimony and child support, as I had essentially done that during my military service when I earned less. It wasn't about the money, it was a matter of principle. If she could cheat on me with her first career boss, what would stop her from doing the same with another person in authority in the future? When I returned home that night, I spoke to my wife for the first time since D-Day. She had written a letter that she wanted to read to me. She explained that she wanted to express her thoughts without getting emotional. As she read the letter, all she said was how sorry she was. She carefully avoided mentioning the Gollum guy and simply apologized for betraying my trust and behaving immaturely. She expressed her desire for us to stay together and her willingness to do anything to repair our marriage. Surprisingly, she also mentioned something unexpected. She said I could sleep with other women if I wanted to. This revelation caught me off guard because my wife had always been the jealous type. I doubted her sincerity and told her that I didn't need her permission to be with other women because she had forfeited the right to have an opinion on that matter. I believed she was using this offer to manipulate me and alleviate her guilt if I acted on it. I interrupted her and clarified that I had no interest in being with other women, and if I were, I wouldn't have married her in the first place. This made her burst into tears, but I insisted that she hadn't explained why she had deceived me for 2 months. It wasn't a one-time mistake. It was premeditated and deliberate. She planned to go to the hotel and engage in a secret affair with this disgusting guy, risking a lot for what? I informed her that we were getting a divorce, and my mind was already made up. I added that despite her physical attractiveness, I couldn't stand sleeping with her or having her near me. She kept asking, "Why are you being so cruel to me?" I had spoiled my wife, treated her like a princess throughout our relationship, never raised my voice, always pampered her, allowed her to make all the rules at home, and gave her control over our household. She had grown accustomed to it. I treated her well and never mistreated her. Perhaps that's why she ended up with the first guy who ordered her around, thinking I would continue being the same nice guy even after she had an affair with her boss. It's unbelievable. And there's more. She also informed me that she had quit her job because she couldn't bear being there and seeing her former boss's face. She said she had everything with me but managed to throw it all away because she thought she could fit in with her coworkers. She claimed she wasn't sure how it had escalated to sexual interaction. Despite my disgust at the thought of her boss, I couldn't shake the question of how a guy who looked like a golem could seduce a woman as attractive as my wife and make her forget her vows. I questioned her persistently, wanting to know why she had fallen for him. She struggled and stumbled over her words while attempting to answer my question. She admitted that she had been grappling with the same question herself, trying to understand how she had become involved with this guy and why she kept going back for more. She emphasized that it wasn't even because the sex was enjoyable. She sarcastically remarked that it certainly wasn't about his looks. The only reason she could come up with was a combination of several factors. He was skilled with words and very articulate. He always seemed to have the right response at the right time, as if he had the answer to every question. His position of authority played a role because the fact that all the girls looked up to him and tried to impress him made him appear more attractive. While the reasons she provided seemed nuanced and well thought out, all I could think about was how much I would enjoy disrupting this golem guy's party over there. I informed my wayward wife that I intended to expose him. At this point, my wife expressed a willingness to do anything to make me happy, even if we were heading for divorce. She couldn't stand seeing me upset with her. I told her that I wanted to expose the golem to his spouse. I explained that, although she had been foolish to let this guy take advantage of her, he needed to be exposed, and it was time for me to seek revenge against him for destroying my family. My wife disclosed where he lived and his wife's name. I asked her how they had been communicating without using text messages, and she revealed that they had been using her work email messenger. I pressed my wayward wife to log into the work messenger and show me the messages. She hesitated and believed it wouldn't be a good idea because it would only further aggravate me. She also expressed fear that I might harm her if she showed me the messages. I continued to insist, but she insisted that since I had decided to proceed with the divorce, she would show me the messages when it was finalized, and we were separated. A few days later, I managed to locate the golem's wife. By the way, the golem was 51 years old, and his wife is 48. I conducted a background check on him to find out where he lived. He had 4 children, with the youngest being 12 years old. I made an additional copy of the video and saved it on a thumb drive. Then, I went to the golem's house when I knew he was still at work, probably involved with another one of his employees. I knocked on his door and his wife answered. I believe she was the only one home at the time. I explained my story to her and handed over the flash drive containing the evidence, along with the anonymous letter that had been sent to me. She revealed that she had received a similar letter and confronted her husband about it. However, he denied any wrongdoing and accused the women at work of being lazy and hating him because he insisted they do their jobs properly. He had convinced his wife that these women were trying to destroy his life, and she believed him. She had never considered hiring a private investigator or suspected anything was amiss. The golem's wife was very grateful for the information I provided, and I left her my contact information as well. She expressed her thanks for my service to the country, and we said our goodbyes. I'm not certain if they ultimately got a divorce or separated, but at least he now knows that I'm aware of his actions. Last week, I submitted all the evidence I had to the HR department. I spoke with a lady on the phone, and she invited me to come by in person. During my visit, I provided another flash drive containing evidence and a statement from my wayward wife, admitting her affair as the reason for her job resignation. I believe this should be sufficient to get him fired from his position. Before leaving the job site, I decided to pay the golem a visit. After exiting the front lobby where the HR office is situated, I went around the corner to the docks area where the 18-wheelers are unloaded. It wasn't a very secure location, and one of the side doors was unlocked, allowing me to slip inside the building. Although I wasn't familiar with the layout, I knew the golem's name, so I asked an employee who directed me to his office. While walking through the warehouse, I noticed that the majority of the workers there were females, including the forklift drivers. It seemed like this company had a policy of hiring predominantly female employees. Although there were some male workers, they were few and far between. As I approached the direction of the golem's office, I saw him exiting one of the offices. I was about 50 feet away when I called him by his name. He turned toward me, trying to identify who I was. He may have assumed I was a truck driver there to drop off something. As I got closer and almost face to face with him, I didn't utter a word. Instead, I delivered a right hook, knocking him out cold with a single punch. Afterward, I calmly walked out of the warehouse. As I reached the exit door, I glanced back and saw a small crowd forming around him as he was starting to regain consciousness. I then opened the door and exited the building. Yesterday, shortly after returning from work, I heard a knock on my door. When I opened it, I found 2 police officers standing there. They had come to question me regarding the assault that occurred at my wife's former workplace. They suspected that I might be involved in the assault on Golem, but they lacked concrete evidence. From the way they framed their questions, it was clear that I was a suspect. Although I was captured on a security camera, the description wasn't very clear, possibly because I was wearing a hat. In a nutshell, Golem had identified me as a suspect and wanted to press charges. I informed the police that I was not responsible, and they asked if I had an alibi. I confirmed that I was at home with my wife, and they requested to speak with her. I agreed, called her, and she lied to cover for me. She didn't know about the assault beforehand, but quickly caught on and supported my false alibi. I'm not certain if the police were satisfied with our answers, but they took pictures of our cars, noted down my contact information, and mentioned they'd reach out if they had further questions. I messed up big time, and it's hard to believe that Golem, who had an affair with my wife, had the audacity to call the cops on me for assaulting him. Fortunately, news spread quickly, and one of the women he had been involved with had the courage to file sexual aggression charges against him. This newfound bravery might have been influenced by the fact that he was being investigated by HR and that I had confronted him at his workplace. As part of their investigation, HR questioned most of the women, and they disclosed the truth. It turns out he had been pressuring many of his female employees for sexual favors. Most of them had initially refused, and those who did comply claimed they did so out of fear or intimidation. It's a complex situation, similar to the Harvey Weinstein case, where some women were willing to engage with him to advance their careers. But once he faced legal trouble, they all portrayed themselves as victims. Nevertheless, I was pleased with the outcome. I heard that he was terminated from his job the following day. My wayward wife had kept in touch with some colleagues, so I'm not entirely sure if the story is accurate or not. A few days later, I reached out to his wife to check on her, and she informed me that they are currently separated. She explained that he no longer resides with them. She was the one who revealed to me that multiple women have filed sexual aggression cases against him. According to his wife, after confronting him with the evidence I provided, he confessed and admitted to having had sexual relations only with my wayward wife. However, it's difficult to believe his claim, especially considering that several women are pressing charges against him. This doesn't bring me any comfort. In fact, I would feel somewhat relieved if it turned out there were multiple women involved rather than just my wife. It's puzzling to me what she gained from this situation. I'm left questioning myself and my judgment for choosing her as my wife in the first place. If she was willing to engage in such behavior so easily, it raises concerns about her faithfulness during my military deployments. Writing this now, I feel utterly devastated and depressed. I've been reading numerous posts about surviving infidelity to find solace and assurance that I'm not alone in this. I also spoke with my brother on the phone, and he suggested seeking help from a therapist due to my current mental state. The VA covers various medical expenses, including visits to therapists, which wouldn't be a financial burden. Nevertheless, I'm hesitant and apprehensive about confiding in a stranger about my problems, even if they are a trained professional. Yet, here I am, sharing my story with a group of strangers online. It somehow feels therapeutic to share and receive advice from anonymous individuals, gaining different perspectives and reading comments and responses. I'm still living in the same house as my wayward wife, but we now occupy separate bedrooms. Her sister has been visiting more frequently, and things appear to be returning to a semblance of normalcy. My wayward wife has been making every effort to keep me happy. Despite this, we haven't been intimate since D-Day, and I have no desire to engage in intimacy with her. I've been procrastinating when it comes to pursuing a divorce, recognizing that the more time I waste, the more comfortable I become with her playing the role of wife and mother once again. Initially, I thought my wayward wife might be inviting her sister over to improve our relationship, since she knows I get along with her. However, it turns out my sister-in-law is considering moving closer to us on her own accord. With her kids nearly grown and her youngest about to enter college, she's looking to live closer to us. We have plenty of family nearby, including my parents, who are aware that our marriage is going through difficulties and that my wife had an affair, though they are unaware of the specifics. Despite her infidelity, my parents still hope we can work things out for the sake of the kids. A few weeks later, my sister-in-law secured a new job close to our area and moved here. My wife and I continue to reside under the same roof, but sleep in separate bedrooms. Essentially, we're roommates now, and I've consistently declined my wife's propositions for intimacy. While it's challenging to go without sex for an extended period, my military experience taught me self-control. My sister-in-law has been visiting more frequently, and it seems she's more interested in spending time with me than with her sister or the kids. My wayward wife noticed this and addressed it with her. I learned about it later, as my sister-in-law started visiting less often without explaining why. My wayward wife tends to be jealous, so her reaction didn't surprise me. It may have been for the best, because I was beginning to develop feelings for my sister-in-law, despite having harbored a long-standing attraction to her. I never acted on those feelings due to my marriage to her younger sister. I was contemplating whether to reconcile with or divorce my unfaithful wife. However, I'm increasingly inclined towards the idea of divorce. Reconciliation seems challenging because I can't bring myself to trust her again. Trust is a fundamental element in any successful relationship, and I can't share a bed with someone I can't trust. She had a 2-month affair and denied me intimacy during that time, which in my view is an unforgivable offense. My wife believes there's a chance for reconciliation, and I've noticed she's been putting in considerable effort to seduce me. She's taken to wearing seductive lace nightgowns around the house, often without underwear or a bra. I'm aware that she's trying to love bomb me and seduce me, and unfortunately, she knows my weaknesses well. It worked, as we ended up having closeness in the kitchen that night. Here's how it unfolded. I was getting something from the refrigerator, perhaps a beer, and as I walked by, I noticed her with her back to me, resting on the kitchen counter while preparing fruits for our kids' school lunch. She was wearing a transparent lace robe with no panties or bra. I tried hard to resist, but I couldn't because she had been parading around the house in that attire earlier, and she had already gotten me aroused. So, as she leaned on the counter, her back to me, I approached her from behind. I put my hands on her hips, pulled her towards me, and then gently moved her into a standing doggy position. I lifted her lace robe, and that's when things escalated. It was probably the most passionate encounter we've ever had. It wasn't the slow, romantic lovemaking we were accustomed to. It was raw and passionate, purely driven by my pent-up desires. I noticed she reached climax more quickly, and her body responded more intensely than ever before. I'm not sure if it was my imagination, but her reaction was unlike anything I'd seen in our 10 years together. During that time, we'd always had slow, tender sex, nothing aggressive or rough. We only stopped because she was getting too loud, and our kids were starting to hear her and were coming out of their rooms. I was still in a daze when the kids interrupted us, and I should have suggested we continue in the bedroom, but instead, I went to the bathroom to finish alone. Unfortunately, last night I had a quick sexual encounter with my unfaithful wife, and it revealed something new about her that I wasn't aware of. I discovered that she enjoys a bit of rough and aggressive intimacy. This revelation was surprising to me because I thought I knew everything about her. Before meeting her, I had limited experience with women, and I remained faithful to her throughout our marriage. It felt like I had married a stranger. In our usual marital intimacy, I let her take the lead, paying close attention to her desires. I've read books on how to please a woman, and most of them emphasize listening to her body's cues. Even the late Bernie Mac had a comedy skit about that. I felt like I had been engaging in conventional sex throughout our marriage, which might not have been what she truly desired. Last night, I took control and did what I wanted, disregarding her preferences, and surprisingly, she responded positively and reached climax faster. What troubled me the most was wondering what else I didn't know about my wife. I began to question myself, wondering if it was my fault that she cheated. Perhaps if I had been more assertive and rough in bed, she wouldn't have strayed with the first guy who took charge. Maybe that's what she craved, her fetish, and I failed to recognize it until now. I felt like all the marriage advice I had read was either inaccurate or didn't apply to her. Last night, it seemed like her body responded to my dominant approach, and my self-focus, disconnected from her desires, led to her heightened response. Maybe she enjoys being controlled, wanted someone to give her commands. I had always been taught to be polite and gentle with my wife, likely reading the same books on intimacy that my priest did. I'm starting to think that her infidelity may have been due to my ignorance about certain aspects of her desires. I really wanted some guidance on this, but I have no one to turn to for such questions. Outwardly, I may appear as the strong, aggressive military guy, trained for combat, but when it came to my unfaithful wife, I turned into Mr. Soft and gentle, letting her take control of our household and even our finances. It's becoming clear to me that I relinquished my power in this marriage, both inside and outside the bedroom. Recognizing my shortcomings is crucial because if I don't, I risk repeating these mistakes in future relationships. Even though the impromptu, intimate encounter with my unfaithful wife was a mistake, it shed light on our relationship. I now believe that because I failed to assert myself both in public and private, my wayward wife took the opportunity to explore being controlled. I couldn't help but think that this might not have been her first experience of this kind. Some individuals on this platform suggested that I should undergo STD testing and consider paternity tests for my children, which is a sensible idea. My kids strongly resemble me, so I find it hard to believe they aren't mine. I used to be confident that my wife didn't cheat on me while I was in the military, but not anymore. These past few weeks have taught me that I don't know as much as I thought I did. I mean, if I hadn't received that letter about her infidelity, she might still be involved with Gollum to this day. I often wonder if his assertiveness played a role in her continued attraction to him. Yesterday, I took an STD test, received the results the same day, and fortunately, I tested negative. Additionally, I decided to go through with the paternity test, as many of you suggested. I collected saliva swabs from 3 of my children for this purpose, all without my wayward wife's knowledge. I'll receive the paternity test results in about 4 weeks. I'm not overly concerned about the paternity test results because I believe my kids are mine, and the timing of their conception aligns with when I was at home. During my time in the military, we lived in on-base housing provided for married service members. As for an update, there's not much to report at the moment. I'm still contemplating moving forward with the divorce. My lawyer has drafted the separation agreement, and it turns out that I will be required to pay her alimony. This won't be much different from our current arrangement, as I've been providing her with financial support since she was a stay-at-home mom. Currently, we're on speaking terms, but sleeping in separate bedrooms, essentially living as roommates. We haven't engaged in any intimate activities since our unexpected encounter on the kitchen counter. She's been making efforts to win me back, but I've been avoiding her, staying out late, hanging out with friends after work, and sometimes not even returning home. She calls my cell phone to check on my whereabouts, but I choose not to answer. She's noticed that I'm emotionally distant and feel that I've mentally checked out of the marriage. I should have initiated the divorce process weeks ago, but I'm hesitant due to my aversion to change. I'm also concerned about managing my demanding job while sharing custody of the children. When we do separate, I'll likely aim for a 70-30 custody arrangement in favor of spending more time with the kids. I adore my children and cherish every moment with them. They often prefer to spend more time with me than with my wayward wife because I tend to indulge them, buying them presents and being lenient, while she takes on the role of disciplinarian. I occasionally hide the gifts I purchase for my kids to avoid my wayward wife's scrutiny, although she usually discovers them eventually. I am the primary breadwinner, and she has been the homemaker, and this arrangement has worked for me. The police haven't contacted me yet regarding the assault, and I hope it remains that way. I've heard that a civil case has been filed against Gollum, but I'm not sure if he's in jail or what happened to him. Apparently, before I intervened, none of these women thought it was a good idea to report him to the HR department for sexual aggression or a similar offense, maybe because they felt their voices wouldn't be heard. I suppose my actions of confronting and humiliating Gollum gave them the courage to stand up against him. Yesterday, I received the paternity test results, and they confirmed that all 3 kids are indeed mine. Thank goodness for that. It looks like I'll be proceeding with the divorce. As I mentioned earlier in this post, I have no qualms about financially supporting my wayward wife. I had informed her beforehand that I would be serving her with divorce papers, and she cried, but she understands there's no turning back. Despite all the embarrassment and pain she caused me, I genuinely wish her well. I have no doubt that she will find someone else soon because she's still a very attractive woman. However, it's the end of the road for both of us. In our conversation before serving her, we discussed her future, and she mentioned getting a part-time teaching job to keep herself occupied. We agreed that I would continue to provide her with an allowance of $3,000 per month, including child support, so the money will be for her and my kids. I've heard that it might not be a wise idea to avoid the legal system, but I have reservations about having more government involvement in my paycheck. Finally, we completed the divorce agreement with both our lawyers present. It was an amicable divorce, and I hold no grudge against her. She clearly regrets her actions and took responsibility for them. I've forgiven her for the sake of my kids, but I'll never trust her or consider reconciling. I recently found a nice 2-bedroom apartment in a good area of town. There are plenty of beautiful women around, and I never had the chance to date since my wife was the only woman I'd been with. It's not as easy as it seems to muster the courage to ask a girl out, because I've never really learned how to date, but I'm still an attractive guy, and women do check me out from time to time, so I like my chances. One more thing, my sister-in-law has been visiting my apartment more often now that I'm no longer living with my wayward wife. It's clear that she's attracted to me, and we've been spending more time together. I don't know where this is headed, but I'm not interested in dating her, and I think she understands that. Nonetheless, we both enjoy each other's company.
Reading the memo brought back memories I wished to forget. Amy, my faithful but cheating ex-wife, is now my boss. How ironic. I should have expected this, but I was just relieved to be out of the marriage. Now it's haunting me even more. Amy once said I was a heart attack waiting to happen, and she was right. My doctor had warned me, but I ignored it, thinking my hard work for the family was justified. Amy was always ambitious, craving luxuries like our mansion, the pool, and an unused country club membership. It was my duty to provide, or so I believed. The love of my life is now in charge of my life again. This realization snapped me out of my apathy. I couldn't work under her, not after learning about her affairs. I packed my things, picked up my resignation letter, and left the office for the last time, leaving the letter, phone, car keys, and credit card on Megan's desk. It's been a pleasure working with you, Megan. I wish you the best. You're a valuable employee, and I appreciate all your help. Take care, and don't let her mess with you. If she does, use me as a threat to get fair treatment. So, you're really leaving, Sam? This isn't just a threat? She asked, waving my letter. Yes, Megan. You know I can't work for someone I don't respect. With all those horrible details, she's lost any chance of my respect. I'll miss you, Sam. She'll be furious when she finds out. She's been pestering me about your workload. I didn't tell her anything, but I felt like I was betraying you. I'm sorry. I should have spoken up sooner. I smiled. Don't worry. You have to protect your job. There's nothing you could have said to change things. I knew it was over when the merger memo came. I have no secrets here, as you know. What should I say when she asks where you are? Tell her the truth. She won't be able to twist it. Do what she wants as long as it doesn't compromise your values. It was my pleasure, dear. I'll stay in touch, I said, shaking her hand and kissing it. As I was getting into my car, a black limousine arrived at the office and Amy stepped out with two well-dressed men, looking every bit the high-status businesswoman. In reality, though, we all knew she was just a well-paid escort with a title. She looked professional in her business suit, but she always looked good in any outfit. She didn't see me, which was perfect. I waited a couple of minutes for her to enter the building before leaving the parking lot for the last time. I had settled my affairs, sold what I needed, and put everything else in storage. My doctor had advised a change of scenery, and I finally took his advice. I spent the next 3 months traveling, sightseeing, and taking a break from work stress. Eventually, I ended up in a small town with a temperate climate, friendly residents, and excellent fishing. I rented a small 3-bedroom cottage with a workshop by the lake, with an option to buy. It had everything I needed to start fresh. Sitting on the back porch, sipping a cold drink, I wondered how Amy reacted to my disappearance. I decided to call Megan the next day to find out. "Hey Megan, it's Sam. How's it going over there?" "Sam, it's so good to hear from you. I was starting to worry you'd disappeared." I laughed, sitting on my deck watching the water. "Not quite vanished, but the view here is amazing. Wish you were here. How's everything there?" "Sam, you sure know how to stir things up. Amy has been causing chaos, laying people off left and right. Kevin Paxton quit last week after she moved him to a windowless basement office. He couldn't stand it and resigned." "I'm sorry to hear that. Kevin was one of the best. What is Amy thinking? She's going to ruin everything. How is she treating you?" Megan chuckled. "She's frustrated. She tried to fire me because I let you go without her talking to you first. I told her she could try to fire me, but I'd take her and the company to court. I reminded her of what you said, and she backed off, realizing her actions could backfire." Megan giggled and continued. "So now I'm the secretary to the demanding executive VP of operations. I guess it's about keeping your enemies closer. I told her I wanted a substantial pay raise with the promotion. She wasn't happy, but just grinned. In the end, I got what I wanted." Megan updated me on the latest office gossip. I was glad my departure had disrupted Amy's plans. I changed my life for my own good, and Amy's presence pushed me to stop procrastinating. This was just a bonus. However, I worried it might affect everyone else, which wasn't my intention. The next morning, I ran out of sugar and decided to visit a nearby store. Their lot borders mine, with an open paddock in between. As I left the store, I almost bumped into a young couple. After apologizing, I noticed a stressed woman in her early 20s behind the counter. "Can I help you?" she asked, as the baby started whimpering and a couple of cars pulled up to the gas pumps. She sighed, "Where is Jillian when I need her?" I smiled and said, "Can I help? I'm Sam and I live nearby. It looks like the baby needs attention and I just need some sugar. I can help out until you're done or until Jillian arrives. Why don't I handle the customers while you take care of your baby?" She smiled back. "I'm Vivian, and I'd be very grateful for your help, Sam." I took care of the travelers while they filled their tanks, washing windshields and chatting with them. After collecting their payments, I returned to the store, where another customer had just walked in. I went over to chat with him. "What can I do for you, sir?" "Just looking at your fishing rods," he replied. "I'm on a business trip and my car's in for repairs. It'll take all day, so I thought I'd do some fishing to pass the time." He looked like a businessman, much like I was a year ago. Seeing he was about to buy cheap gear, I asked, "Do you fish often?" He shook his head. "Not really, but I'd like to if I had time." I smiled and convinced him that investing in better equipment would increase his chances of catching fish and enjoying his time. I then helped a dozen other customers before Vivian finished settling her daughter. "Thank you so much, Sam. Why does it always get busy when you least expect it?" "Bessie doesn't usually fuss now, and Jillian is always here by this time." I grinned. To explain it, I'd need to understand quantum mechanics, which I don't. Maybe you need more reliable help. Vivian's face fell, and I quickly apologized, realizing I had upset her. With sad eyes and a tear, she said, "Sam, it's not your fault, but I'm a widow." Vivian told me her husband, Greg, an Army reservist, had been eliminated in a training accident. His truck flipped over and he died, never knowing he was going to be a father. Bessie was likely conceived the night before he left. Wiping her tears, Vivian said, "He would have been a good father. He had so many ideas, and this place was one of them," gesturing to the store and land. "Over the next few weeks, I often helped out at the store. I know what you're thinking, and you're probably right. Vivian was beautiful, and my hormones had been dormant for a while, but it also restored my sense of self-worth. Amy's infidelity had made me feel unneeded and inadequate as a provider. That was the final insult. Vivian seemed to understand my need to help. She never directly asked for it, but always appreciated it. Spending time with her made me feel good. She was fun, caring, and grateful, which was exactly what I needed. I was heading home from another day at the store when my phone interrupted my thoughts. "Hi, Sam. Lucky you're not a secretary. You wouldn't last a day with your phone manners," a woman's voice purred. "Hi, Megan. You caught me off guard. It's almost 7 p.m. Is something urgent?" Megan's tone changed. "I waited until I got home to call because I think my work phone is tapped. Sam, you need to be careful. She hired a private investigator to follow you. She asked me to set it up, and I can't refuse without risking my job. But I wanted to warn you so you can lay low," I sighed. "Is she trying to intimidate me to pass away?" "I don't know, Sam. She's stressed, working long hours to turn things around. She looks older and has gained weight." "She can't be pregnant. Or maybe she could, but not by me." Megan giggled. "No, it's from stress and comfort eating. She's frantic to find you and blames me for letting you leave without talking to her." "Good grief. Ignoring her is useless. Here's an idea. In a week, give her a fake report saying the investigator couldn't find me, but confirm my phone is active. Tell her you convinced me to talk to her." Megan sounded hesitant. "Are you sure, Sam? I don't feel good about this." "Don't worry, Megan. Look after yourself first. I appreciate your help, but don't put yourself at risk." A week later, Megan texted me before work. "PH02, BB2DayB, ready for. Call today sometime." I chuckled at the acronyms. BB was for bad boss. Damn these young people and their tech. I wondered what I'd say to Amy, but decided to figure it out when the time came. As promised, the call came. I answered Amy's number. "Yes, Amy, what do you want?" She seemed caught off guard by my abrupt greeting. "What's that cow my secretary been up to?" I hung up. The phone rang again. "Damn it, Sam." I hung up again. The next call, Megan quickly answered. "Are you going to talk to her or not?" I grinned. "Tell her to be polite next time and she might get more than 2 words out of me. I'm sick of her attitude." Megan chuckled. "My pleasure, Sam. Talk to you later." 5 minutes later, the phone rang again. "Sam?" "Yes, Amy. What do you want?" A pause. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" "I'm listening." Another pause. "Megan cried on your shoulder. What did she say?" "Megan is very capable. It doesn't matter what she told me. Your so-called secretary is the only reason you're talking to me now. You should be grateful to her. So, what do you want?" I thought I heard a sigh. "I'm sorry, Sam. I'm just a little cranky lately. I know Megan is doing a good job and I appreciate it." Amy was trying to diffuse my irritation, but I wondered why she gave in so quickly. "Get to the point, Amy. What do you want?" I heard Amy suppress a sob. "I really need your advice, Sam. I thought we would work together as a team, but you quit and disappeared before I could explain." I snickered. "I saw the writing on the wall, Amy. When your company bought mine, I didn't see the point in staying to be humiliated again. So have a happy life, Amy. Goodbye." "No, please, Sam, I need to talk to you in person, not over the phone. Just give me 30 minutes to pitch my idea. I'm begging you. I don't know who else to turn to." I gritted my teeth, wanting to hang up and forget her. After a long pause, I finally said, "Okay, Amy, but I'm not chasing you. You come to my office. I'll arrange it with Megan, and she'll let you know when and where." I hung up before she could respond, and half expected her to call back, but the phone stayed silent all night. Amy was annoyed. "Why do I have to go through Megan? Why can't you just give me Sam's address so I can go alone?" Megan gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles turning white. "Amy, this is what Sam wants. He doesn't want to see you. In his words, my way or the highway. I don't enjoy sitting in the car with you for hours either. But if he wants me to bring you, you'll have to deal with it. I won't be there for your conversation, though. I'll make myself scarce." I started chopping vegetables for the Italian sauce I was making for dinner. Megan had called 30 minutes ago to let me know they'd arrive soon, which meant they'd be here in about 20 minutes. I wanted Amy to feel uncomfortable, so I stayed busy to put her at a disadvantage. 15 minutes later, I heard a knock. "It's open. Come in." "Well, don't you look completely at home," remarked Megan with a genuine smile. I chuckled. "Hi, Megan. Good to see you too. You look good." I saw Amy standing behind her looking worried. "Amy?" That was all I said, but I noticed her tired eyes and weight gain. Megan's estimate of 10 pounds might have been a bit harsh, but it wasn't far off. "I could use a drink," Megan said, giving me a friendly hug and a kiss on the cheek. "The country air suits you. You look great." There's wine, beer, or Coke in the fridge, I replied, holding up my grubby hands. Want something to drink? I glanced at Amy. Amy noticed my cold tone and lowered her head, realizing this meeting would be tough. Hi, Sam. Wine would be nice. Megan's right. You look good. Megan opened a bottle of white wine, poured 2 glasses, and handed one to Amy. Which way to the view? She asked, waving the wine bottle. I'll leave you 2 alone. Remember, she pointed the bottle at me. I'm not here to clean up a crime scene, so behave. I smiled and pointed to the back door. Don't worry about me. There's a fishing rod on the deck if you want to try it out. Megan rolled her eyes. Not likely. I wouldn't know what to do with a fish even if I caught one, she said as she slipped out the door, leaving Amy and me alone. Take a seat and tell me why you're here, I said, pointing to a chair and returning to chopping herbs. Amy hesitantly sat down, trying to lighten the mood. Nice place you have here. Small, but nice. I tensed, my irritation showing. This isn't small talk, Amy, I said, focusing on the basil. Just say what you need to, and we can get back to our lives. Amy sighed and took a sip of wine. Can I ask one question? Ask as many as you want, Amy. Doesn't mean I'll answer, but try. Why did you leave? She asked, watching for any sign of anger. Knowing my temper, she could see I was trying to stay calm. I dropped the knife and turned to her. You don't need a degree to understand my motives, Amy. You're a vice president now. You must have some brains. Figure it out. Amy looked irritated. That was a low blow, even for you, Sam. I'm capable of doing my job, but I'm not a mind reader. I folded my arms and stared at her. Amy seemed to wilt under my gaze. You're right, Amy. You're not a mind reader, and few people are. But in your job, you need to read people, understand and guess their motives. A good manager finds and utilizes their employees' talents for the company's benefit. It has to be a win-win situation. Do you really want to know what I think of you and your talents, Amy? She shivered at my question, clearly expecting an answer that wouldn't boost her confidence. But she squared her shoulders. Okay, Sam, I'll bite. What do you think of my corporate talents? I almost laughed at her weak attempt at teasing and returned to cooking. You're a bulldozer, Amy. You have the finesse of a bull in a china shop. Her open mouth said it all. Bulldozer, she repeated, stunned. Care to elaborate on that? I smiled inwardly as I continued chopping. Yes, Amy, bulldozer. You take the most direct path to your goal without considering the effort or analyzing the situation. You don't think about who you can help or who can help you. You only think about yourself, charging ahead and ignoring anyone in your way. That's why you're in your current unenviable position. You've burned bridges and ruined opportunities. I saw a tear in her eye. For the first time, she seemed at a loss. No, I don't want to, she said weakly. Everything I did was for us. But your ego got in the way. I know I hurt you, and I'm sorry. If you had stayed, I could have explained my plan. You still haven't told me why you left. I tasted the sauce and added more salt. I saw the writing on the wall, Amy. I know you're here to cut the deadwood. You're the person sent to remove those who needed to go for the company to move forward. I agree it was necessary. I just made it easier for you to make those decisions. I saw the anticipation in her eyes. This was the conversation she wanted. Sam Beckman, for a smart man, you sure do some stupid things. I had no intention of firing you. If you were smart, you'd know that. Everything I did was for us, to make your dreams come true. That's quite a trick. It tugs at my heartstrings and strokes my ego simultaneously. But I never said you weren't good at stroking. I remember countless times we sat in the kitchen talking about how the fools at the top were ruining the company. I believed in you, Sam. I believed you could get the company back on its feet. Now I have the chance to help you turn your ideas into reality. I worked hard to give you that chance, telling my bosses I could make your company profitable. And what did that get me? Now it's all your fault angle. You've left me to my fate without hearing me out. I keep fighting, working long hours on what you said could be done. All I need is a little help from the one man I've ever loved. It's you, Sam. We can sit back and reap the rewards of our efforts. I love you, and this is our future. I'm not naive enough to think we'll get back together, though I dream about it. But I see now that we can have a good business relationship and be happy. So, what do you say? How about we call a truce, start working together, and show them we're a force to be reckoned with? Amy took another sip of wine and leaned back, her fervor fading. She had made her point, and now it was up to me. While she talked, I finished the sauce and put water on to boil for the spaghetti. The only thing I could think of were Julius Caesar's last words, "Et tu, brute." Betrayal was my first thought when I found out about her actions. Despite everything, Amy was very attractive. One thought kept me sharp, encapsulating her past and present actions. Good, Amy. A good manager considers all aspects before deciding. Let's say I buy into your brilliant plan. Why do you think I can help you? Amy's eyes flashed with annoyance. I've told you I believe you can do it. You have the credibility within the company to get the support of the employees. They trust and respect you. Your obstacles were with upper management, and my position as VP has removed them. I smiled sadly at her naivety. You don't see that your very presence as VP undermines my ability to gain support. But I'm not surprised. You refuse to believe you've done anything wrong. Others see it differently, Amy. I saw the concern on Amy's face as I continued. Have you ever wondered why you struggle to gain support for your ideas? The rumor mill has done a thorough job informing everyone about your business practices and ethics, and not a word of it came from me. Amy's face froze. I was treading into territory she wanted to avoid. People see you as someone who slept her way to the top, leaving more deserving employees in the dust. They know about our failed marriage and how I kept my dignity and their respect by divorcing you. If I accepted your offer, it would signal that everything you did was acceptable. I'd go from a wronged husband to a disgraced employee, losing their respect and my effectiveness. Tears formed in Amy's eyes as my words sank in. Her confidence was cracking. I don't believe you, Sam. I've shown I'm willing to work hard. I took a powerful position to get the job done. I'm capable, or Jason wouldn't have given me the job. I shook my head, my anger turning to sadness. Amy truly believed her own narrative, perhaps out of self-preservation. Did Jason approach you with the takeover offer, or did you push him? Amy wiped her face with a tissue from her purse and straightened up. Hopefully it doesn't matter what you or anyone else thinks. I'm not Jason's puppet. I approached him, and he put up a lot of barriers before letting me present my proposal to the board. I nodded. Just as I thought. Did Jason entertain you when he finally let you speak to the board? Her sigh gave her away. Trying to gather her thoughts, she asked, Why do you think that? I grinned. Do you know why I was good at my job, Amy? I've always made profiles of everyone I meet, including you. My mistake was trusting you unconditionally because I loved you. That cost me dearly, so I adjusted your profile. As my grandfather said, there's no point in getting older if you're not getting smarter. I assess people by their words and actions to see if they fit their profile. Knowing Jason, I doubt he cares if you succeed. If you fail, he'll blame the board for approving your proposal. I saw a glimmer of realization in her eyes as I continued. If you succeed, Jason gets the credit for bringing in a promising executive. If you fail, he'll just point fingers at the board. Jason doesn't care if you're smart enough or foolish enough to think you can pull this off. As long as you keep him entertained, he'll be satisfied. You're on your own, Amy, a small fish in a big pond full of hungry piranhas. Amy clutched the napkin tightly. Everything I'd said was true, and she seemed frightened by the reality of her situation, but she still tried to deny it. So, you don't think I can do it? I shrugged. No, Amy, I know you can't. I saw anger building in Amy, but continued. It would take a huge Saturn V rocket to launch you from your VP position into corporate oblivion. Where will your precious security be then, Amy? I turned away to calm myself. From what I hear, you've only managed to spin your wheels and create so much smoke that everyone else struggles to do their jobs. I'll be surprised if the next shareholders meeting doesn't announce a 25% drop in profits. But that's just speculation. No matter how you spin it, it all comes down to your reasons for starting this. You said you loved me and did it for both of us. Amy shuddered but nodded. But really, it's all about your safety, not ours. If you loved me, you would have tried to stop me from working myself to pass away. You called me a heart attack waiting to happen. I paused, then continued. You didn't try to stop me, or if you did, it wasn't convincing. You just waited for me to drop dead. You could have threatened divorce to make me think about us. Your infidelity made me realize things. That's why I'm here now, and feeling great. I love you, Sam. I didn't want to divorce you. You didn't want to divorce me, but you were willing to let me work myself to pass away. Does that sound loving? I finished sarcastically. Amy couldn't refute my arguments and couldn't bear to look at me. I didn't mean what I said then, and I love you even now. I regret a lot of what I said, Amy pleaded. My grim face must have shown doubt. I'm sure you believe what you're saying, Amy, but that doesn't change our situation. Don't you realize I can't trust you now, either personally or in business? I've decided to end this discussion. You made it to the top. Now you'll have to wait for Jason to retire or disappear before you can aim for CEO. You've decided this is a good time to solidify your position and go for that coveted role. Amy tried to object, but I stopped her. Your plan is clear. Take over my old firm and get me to work hard again to benefit you. I'm amazed you expected me to follow your orders. When I kicked you out, I thought it was clear I wasn't weak. Maybe it was my fault for setting you up to fail. I saw Amy struggling to hold it together. One moment I blamed you. The next, I was taking responsibility. You're talking nonsense, Sam. I think you're the one with it backward, she countered. I hung my head and sighed in despair. Good, Amy. You've heard being cruel to be kind. I wasn't being kind. I led you on and then had to cut you down harshly. Instead, I went to Jason and made him fulfill his promise to make you a GP. I didn't want to see you left to suffer, even though you deserved it. I made a mistake by making you think there was a chance I'd take you back. Your love cards on my birthday, Christmas, and other occasions proved that. I checked the sauce and added water to the nearly dry pot. If I did what I should have, you'd have disappeared to some unknown place to start over. That's what I want you to do now. Walk away and start over. Tears streamed down her face. You might have to go back to a secretarial job, but it won't be as bad as staying and fighting. You'll be lucky if you're allowed to lick stamps while some post office idiot entertains you. I watched as my words sank in. Her defiance, not humility, made me sad. I know I hurt you, Sam. I berate myself every day for it, but what you said is just evil. You don't believe in me, yet I believe in you. Well, if that's how you feel, watch and I'll show you how it's done. At that moment, there was a knock at the door. Come in, I said irritably. Is everything okay, Sam? I'm sorry if I'm interrupting, Vivian asked. I sighed, realizing I'd lost my temper, and checked my watch. I'm sorry, Vivian. Please don't come in. Amy was just leaving. I glared at Amy, waiting for her to get up. Amy looked at Vivian standing in the doorway. She was younger, maybe by 5 or 10 years, and very pretty with long, flowing, dark blonde hair. Amy's face showed her realization of why Vivian was here. She turned to me, saw the food simmering on the stove, and began to cry as she understood the situation. I glanced at the dinner I was making for Vivian and me, recognizing what Amy was thinking. What? You thought this was for you? I told you this wasn't a social event. Don't be upset that I invited a friend to dinner. We broke up years ago. The only reason I let you come here was to knock some sense into you. Amy stood up, head down, and rushed past Vivian, muttering, Tell Megan I'll be waiting in the car. I hope I didn't make things worse, Vivian said, watching Amy leave. I can go if you need to deal with this. Can I tell Jillian I don't need her as a babysitter? It's not your fault. I'm glad you showed up when you did. I hugged Vivian and kissed her cheek. You can watch the pasta for a minute. I need to tell Megan our meeting is over and she can take Amy home. I stepped out onto the back terrace and saw Megan napping in the afternoon sun. Amy's words echoed in my mind. Now that she was vice president, she had removed all the obstacles blocking my ideas, and it got me thinking. How do you like the view? I asked. It's just like you said, Sam. Amazing. Megan smiled, closing her eyes. How did it go in there? I didn't hear any fire shots. Not well. She's not backing down. She's in the car waiting for you. Can I ask you something? Sure, Sam. You can ask me anything. I smiled weakly. How do you see your future at work? How ambitious are you, Megan? Her eyes widened at the unusual question. I'm not sure what you're getting at, Sam, but if it's what I think, I'd like to get Amy's job first. She stood up. I know I can do it well, but I won't compromise my values. Why do you ask? I think it's time to end this circus, I said determinedly. Can you contact Kevin Paxton and meet me in town in 3 weeks? I might have an offer for both of you. Megan nodded. I led Megan back inside, where she saw Vivian at the stove. She poked me in the ribs, whispering, Now I see why Amy ran off, you old dog. Megan's look made me smirk. She's gorgeous and probably the final nail in Amy's coffin. Amy is out of her league. Never was in her league. I'm not even in her league. She's licking her wounded pride right now. I nodded, appreciating Vivian's beauty. And she's just as lovely on the inside. Vivian looked up as I introduced Megan. Nice to meet you. Sam has so many women in his life, I'm not sure he has room for me, she said hesitantly. Megan chuckled. Don't worry about the other women you see Sam with. He's a one-woman man, sweetheart, and from what I can tell, he's got his eye on you. Watch out, though. Sam can be a real charmer when he's interested. I wasn't sure what Megan meant, as we hadn't been in social situations together. I felt my face redden. I think you've said enough for one night, Megan. It's time to leave. As I nudged her toward the front door, she looked back with a final comment. If you're smart, Vivian, you won't let this guy slip away. She kissed me on the cheek and said goodbye. Be smart. I'll see you in 3 weeks. Vivian and I sat on the back deck, sipping Merlot and watching the waterfowl. We chatted casually about the day, and I told Vivian the details of my failed marriage to Amy and its aftermath. You don't want to do this, do you, Sam? Vivian observed. No, I don't, I admitted, but it has to be done. I can't let everyone lose their jobs because I took the easy way out. I have no choice. After a pause, Vivian said, You know, Amy still has feelings for you. I almost laughed. I knew that before, but I don't think so now, not after what I said to her today. I was harsh, but it didn't seem to matter. Vivian smiled. For all your toughness, it's clear you care about others, Sam, including Amy. We women appreciate that quality in our men. I had no response, so I went back to my beer. Vivian patted my arm reassuringly. I believe you'll do the right thing for everyone. I nodded with a grim feeling. But I'm afraid not everyone will agree. You didn't make her bed, Sam. She did, and now she has to lie in it, Vivian said, breaking the silence after a couple of minutes. I was lost in my thoughts when she caught me off guard. Speaking of beds, when are you going to show me yours? Her statement came out of nowhere and surprised me. Huh? Vivian chuckled. Megan told me that if I wanted you, I shouldn't hesitate. She said, if you're smart, Vivian, you won't let this guy out of your grasp. So here I am, holding on to someone I think is worth it. So you're interested in more than just a platonic relationship. I sounded like a nervous teenager testing the waters, my poor track record with women making it hard to look her in the eye. Vivian giggled. You're blushing, Sam. My ears burned, and a sheepish grin spread across my face. You sure know how to make a guy feel awkward. I rubbed my face to regain my composure. That day I walked into your store, saw you looking shattered, and offered my help. I felt like a knight in shining armor rescuing a damsel in distress. Her smile was priceless. You were my knight on his trusty steed that day, and you still are, Vivian said, kissing my cheek affectionately. Since that day, I've depended on you. Now I understand why you've supported me all these months. She paused, seeing my confusion. It must have been hard when Amy showed you weren't needed. Well, if it helps, I need you, Sam. I haven't felt this comfortable and relaxed since Greg died. Yes, it's a man thing. Amy didn't understand it, and I couldn't explain it either. Vivian patted my arm reassuringly. You've been good to me, Sam, and I appreciate it. It wasn't until Megan's antics that I realized I had more than friendly feelings for you. So, do you want to take it to the next level? Vivian's face showed sincerity and hope. Well, madam, if you insist, I shall have to show you my etchings, I said with a sly grin. Vivian's face lit up. Forget the etchings. I'm more interested in the tool you used to make them. We both laughed as she stood up and headed for the door, saying, Race you to the bedroom. Later, I saw Kevin and Megan watching me walk into the restaurant. My mood must have been obvious. Kevin stood up and offered his hand. Long time no see, old friend. It's great to see you after all these years. You look 10 years younger. I smiled, shaking Kevin's hand. It's good to see you, too. I'm doing great. How's life? Ooh, average to average. Can't complain because no one ever listens, Kevin said. I smiled and kissed Megan on the cheek. You look as radiant as ever. I don't know what you saw in this brute, but I hope he treated you well, Megan chuckled. He may be rough, but I like the rugged type. How do you know? Kevin asked. I smiled. Because I'm a people watcher. I saw your reaction when I asked Kevin to be here today. I think you two would make a formidable team. Kevin grinned. Speaking of which, what's the offer? I chuckled. Straight to business, Kevin. You'll never change. Okay, let's talk business. Then we can relax and enjoy the food. As the waitress served our drinks, I began. The company is in serious trouble. If nothing is done soon, everyone will be looking for new jobs. As you know, options are limited. I pulled several folders from my briefcase and handed a white one to Kevin. Feel free to disagree or add anything. While Kevin studied the folder, I opened another. Here's a list of people you need to get on your side. I'll leave it to you to figure out how. Kevin flipped through the folder. It's clear you've thought this through. Not only are you targeting JPL and Amy, but also Dobson Inc. and Jason. I saw Kevin's expression and knew what he was thinking. We don't have a choice, Kevin. Since Dobson bought out JPL, we need to attack from both sides. My original focus was on JPL, but now we must target Dobson's board too. If you can get the board on your side and Megan handles JPL, we have a chance, albeit a small one. Kevin handed the folder to Megan. You're right. Sam's situation is more than dire. It's anorexic. But I see potential. It wouldn't hurt to involve Jack Deacon. He's a master at accounting. I nodded grimly. Jack is a genius with numbers, but we didn't get along. He never liked me. Megan nodded while looking through the folder. I agree with Kevin. Jack should be involved for his creative accounting skills. I'll talk to him first. Kevin picked up the second folder and examined the list of names. I'm not sure I can meet some of these people, let alone bring them on board. I smirked at Kevin's doubt. What do you think I've been doing for the last 3 weeks? There's one name, Slovak, that I couldn't get close to. If he's not on board, none of this will work. How did you become so influential? Influential? My back. If I were that good, Slovak would be on our side. I handed Kevin another folder. This is a list of meetings you have scheduled with everyone except Slovak. Megan looked up from the folder. Isn't Slovak Jerry Cambridge's uncle? Maybe Jerry can arrange a meeting with him. Kevin and I exchanged glances and shrugged. Kevin asked, Can you figure this out, Megan? Megan smiled. I have a meeting with Jerry tomorrow about the trip plans. I'll ask him then. This made me feel a bit better. I've organized the times and dates for you. Things are getting messy, even in the higher levels of government. I outlined my concerns, but didn't have a solid plan yet. We need to finalize the details and get everyone together to complete the final version. Megan shook her head. I can't believe Jason didn't see this coming. Oh, he knows, I scoffed. He just doesn't care. He has a scapegoat, and Amy's in for a nasty surprise when he betrays her. Megan wrinkled her nose sympathetically. Amy may be selfish, but she doesn't deserve that. I nodded. Jason will need to act before the next quarterly meeting to stay clean. We must act quickly and precisely. If we impress the big shots, we'll succeed. Kevin shook his head. You think we're going to accept your offer? I smiled. Come on, Kevin, think about it. What do you have to lose? If Amy could pitch her ideas, you can do it too. You haven't found a job that matches your skills, have you? I know you have issues with Amy, and Jason isn't on your Christmas list either. I nodded to Megan. She believes in you as much as I do. You'll run with it. I've done all I can. Now you just need to bring home the bacon. Kevin laughed along with Megan. All tied up with a neat pink ribbon, he said sarcastically. Megan frowned. What about Jason? He won't give up without a fight, and he has the support to sabotage us before we even start, she said, looking through the second folder. I grinned. Leave Jason to me. You won't have to deal with him. Just keep Amy busy so she doesn't do something stupid like commit professional self-destruction while taking everyone else down. Megan smirked. After your conversation the other day, she's our least worry. Vivian's presence rattled her, and now she's determined to prove you wrong. You really messed with her head, Sam. I've had to tweak a lot of her proposals just to make her look somewhat competent. Kevin, Megan, and I enjoyed our meal while discussing our plans. As we said our goodbyes, we arranged to meet again in 2 days with others to finalize our strategy. The meeting was heated. Megan and Kevin had brought in a half-dozen allies to help. Jack Deacon was one of them, and as I predicted, he was hostile but listened. Let me see the financial packet, he demanded. We watched as he quickly reviewed the numbers. This is nonsense, Beckman. You can't substantiate these numbers. I wanted to snap at him, but managed to stay calm. They're just estimates, projected approximations. Deacon smiled sarcastically. Don't quit your day job, Beckman. These numbers are as unreliable as weather forecasts. It's time to show the money. I knew I had to handle him carefully. Listen, Deacon, can I call you Jack? I know we haven't seen each other since Amy took over, but you're here because you're the best at what you do. I could see his chest heaving, sensing I was on the right track. Jack grinned. I may seem like a mere laborer to you, but I'm not so socially inferior that I don't recognize being patronized. I gritted my teeth in annoyance. I know that sounded patronizing, but it doesn't make my words any less true. I addressed everyone in the room. What will you do when the next shareholders' meeting rolls around? I don't care if you agree with this proposal or not. I can leave and return to my life, letting you figure out how to get in line for unemployment. Jack, you're a genius with numbers and can get a job quickly. But what about them? We need you to get creative and make those projections work. I saw the gears turning in his mind. So this isn't some scam to move your wife up the corporate ladder? I shook my head sadly. No, Jack, she's my ex-wife. She'll be lucky to shuffle papers in a dark, windowless room if we pull this off. I regret not burning that bridge when I divorced her. I'm here to fix that mistake. Whether this takeover works or not, both she and Jason will be history. I guarantee it." Jack looked around the room and then back at the folder. "You know, Sam, I've been doing so much with so little for so long. Now I have the chance to do everything with nothing." He grinned widely. "What's the deadline for this miracle?" I looked at Kevin. "I need it by 3 p.m. tomorrow," he replied cautiously. "Holy crap," Jack exclaimed, eyes wide. "I'm fine, Kevin, but even God would struggle to sort this out by then." We all exchanged glances, and I started to worry that my plan might fail. Then Jack said something surprising. "If I pull this off, I want a sign on my desk that says God," he joked. After a moment, Kevin grinned. "I'll personally engrave it, and everyone will kneel and pay their respects if you bring me those numbers by 3 p.m. tomorrow." We all sighed in relief. "Okay, folks, we're burning the midnight oil. Call whoever you need to and get to work." Megan asked if she could invite some of the girls from the typing group to help. "It's your choice, Megan. Show us what you can do. I'm here to help with any questions, but it's up to you now," I said, handing control to her. "Oh my God," she exclaimed, glaring at Kevin. "Sam's right, honey. Pull yourself together and show everyone they can rely on you in a crisis." Kevin and I stepped back as Megan took a deep breath and got to work. Within an hour, she was organizing groups and brainstorming ideas. Jack argued with her until she snapped. "I don't care how many people you need to bring in to meet the deadline, Jack. You know what we're up against, so just do it, okay?" Kevin chuckled. "I think you were right, Sam. She is a hard worker." I smiled at Kevin's pride in her. I lightly slapped his arm. "I never doubted it, Kevin." I tapped my temple in agreement and went to help. I walked into Jason's office, past his shocked secretary. "I'm sorry, sir, but you can't go in there." Jason waved her away in disgust. "It's okay, Lynn. What's this Beckman invasion about?" Clearly, Jason was upset to see me. "That's no way to start a negotiation, Jason. I'd think a man of your business acumen would know when to be a bit more contrite." I wore a menacing smile. Jason sat back, waiting. I knew in a battle of wills, the first to speak loses. Jason, sweating, finally interrupted. "Are you just going to stand there? Or are you going to tell me why you're here? I have a shareholders meeting in an hour." "I'm here to help you pack, idiot," I informed him. "And where am I supposed to go?" Jason clearly didn't like how this was going. "I don't care where you go as long as you're out of here by the end of the day," I said with a grin. "But I'd suggest moving to another state, maybe even the other side of the country." "What if I refuse to leave? I'm close to retirement and not giving up my lucrative package for someone like you." I shook my head. "You have two choices. Resign now and walk away with what you have, or stay and watch me dismantle your life, including your family. You'll be lucky to afford a cup of coffee." Jason frowned. "I did what you wanted. I made Amy vice president, and she now controls JPL. Why the threats? We've never met, but I thought you kept your word. What changed your mind? Are you coming after me because of the past?" I leaned forward, placing both hands on his desk, our faces inches apart. "You changed my mind. I was holding up my end until you broke it. Now you pay. You screwed Amy over and let her present a doomed proposal to the board. You saw a chance to kill two birds with one stone, knowing she'd turn to me for help, and you knew I wouldn't. You broke our agreement, and now I demand payment." Sweat trickled down Jason's face as he listened, realizing everything I said was true. "I didn't break our deal, Beckman. She came to me. I only gave her a chance to prove herself. If she's in this position, it's her fault." "Don't crap me, you lowlife," I said, sweeping items off his desk in anger. "You could have stopped her. Even a fifth grader could see she had no chance without your help. It was your choice, and you made the wrong one. Now fix it. Resign or watch your life get destroyed." Jason's face showed a range of emotions, and I enjoyed watching him struggle. "I doubt you have enough on me to follow through on your threats," he said. I smiled, watching him mentally hit dead ends. "Do you think I've been idle? I have dirt on your affairs, corporate fraud, embezzlement, and more. Your choice, jail or retirement." I saw realization dawn in his eyes as he understood his only option was to leave. "Kevin Paxton is talking to your board right now with a plan that will ruin you. When I leave here, I'm handing everything I have to them." That broke Jason. He pressed the intercom. "Lynn, come in with a pad and pencil. I need to dictate a letter." I walked to his wine cabinet and poured a scotch. "No need to hurry, Jason. You win. I'll be gone by the end of the day." As I sipped my drink, his secretary entered and sat to take dictation. "No problem, Jason. I'll make sure to send your email." Lynette sensed the tension as she waited for Jason to start dictating. By the time he finished, she could barely contain her laughter and quickly left the office. Seeing her reaction, I knew Jason wouldn't have time to gather his belongings before leaving. As he exited his office for the last time, I called out, "I hear the weather is nice at the South Pole this time of year. I won't be looking for you there. Have a good day, Jason." Lynette returned a few minutes later and hugged me. "Thank you, Mr. Beckman. Thank you so much." I pulled back, confused. "Why are you thanking me?" Tears welled up in Lynette's eyes. "Jason tried to blackmail me. He's been making advances, just hints so far, but I think he planned to push harder if I didn't comply. I can't tell you how much I appreciate what you've done." I was furious that Jason had behaved this way. I knew Amy had served her time, and now Jason was targeting Lynette. I decided his fate was sealed, and his marriage was likely in jeopardy. "If all goes well, he will just ask you to do your job well. He's a fair and honest man who values employee loyalty." Lynette kissed me on the cheek. "You're on my Christmas list now, and I'll try to talk my husband into naming our next son after you." She grinned. "Thanks again for your help." She handed me the envelope. Typing this letter was the most fun I've ever had. 6 months later, I walked into the same office Jason had left. "Good morning, Lynn. Is the boss in?" "Good morning, Mr. Beckman. Yes, Mr. Paxton is expecting you." As I reached for the door, she added, "Mr. Beckman, you were right. He's everything a secretary could want in a boss. Thanks again." I grinned as I opened the door. "My pleasure, Lynn. And call me Sam. Mr. Beckman was my father." Lynette chuckled and waved. I asked, sinking into a chair, "How does it feel to be CEO of one of the most profitable companies in the stock market?" "Sam, you old idiot. Where have you been? How are you? I can't tell you how much I appreciate what you've done for everyone, especially Megan and me. She still pinches herself every morning to make sure it's not a dream." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh, really? How do you know that? Are you waking up next to her? Is a mini-merger planned?" I joked. Kevin shrugged. "We're in the negotiation stage, but a deal is likely soon. Megan would love to have you at the signing. And I hear you have a little filly you're nursing too." I laughed. "Exactly. You had a business to save. I had one to build. Vivian is a fine thoroughbred. If I get the chance, I'll hitch my wagon to her." As our banter subsided, Kevin asked more seriously, "Have you heard about Amy?" I grew solemn. "Yes, Megan called when she was taken to the hospital. The stress was too much and she snapped. Megan asked if I would visit her, but I thought it would only make things worse until she gets professional help." Kevin nodded. "Yeah, you're probably right. Megan feels a bit sorry for her. She might offer Amy an entry-level position at JPL, maybe as a secretary. I hope that doesn't offend you." I shook my head. "No, I don't hate her. I don't even like her anymore. She's just someone I once knew. I hope she gets better and moves on." Kevin leaned back. "So, no desire to come back? I could find you a good job with a great financial package." I grinned. "Not a chance. Besides, you don't need me. From what I hear, you've got God working for you now." Kevin burst into laughter. "Oh yeah, I almost forgot about Jack. He got his plaque and earned everyone's respect. You were right. He's a math genius. For a while, he was a hotshot. I'd walk into board meetings an hour before the shareholders meeting with his financial report in hand." Kevin giggled. "What's so funny?" I asked. "I was just thinking about how Jack looked when the girls would sneak up on him. We'll see how socially awkward he is when he tries to figure out women with math formulas. If he succeeds, I'll believe he's a god." I laughed. I would have loved to see that and attend the board meeting, but I had other business. While you were grooming board members, poor Jason was sweating at the table you now occupy. Kevin smiled. "If you ever need a job, let me know." I shook my head. "I have what I want now. Vivian and I have opened our family resort. I'm here to offer you corporate rates for Thanksgiving weekend. You could have contests and promote team building." Kevin nodded. "I think we can agree. Maybe a fishing contest or two will foster camaraderie." Vivian and I were invited to Kevin and Megan's wedding, and now they have 2 wonderful boys. They are still a formidable team in the business world. At Christmas, we get cards from Lynn and her family. She even talked her husband into naming their next child after me. Her name is Samantha, short for Sam. Jason hasn't been heard from since his wife dumped his clothes on the lawn and turned on the sprinklers. His Elvis autographed guitar became a necklace for his favorite garden gnome after Nancy dropped it on his head. I assume he's hunting penguins in Antarctica to keep warm, but that's just a rumor. And Amy, after getting the help she needed to recover from what Jason did to her, she accepted Megan's offer for an entry-level secretary job. She sold her luxurious mansion and bought a modest apartment within walking distance of work. She'll never be part of the elite business environment again, but she has her own home and will work until retirement. I talked to her at the corporate Thanksgiving party at the lake. She was hesitant to come until Megan convinced her to unwind. We chatted and she apologized for her arrogance, admitting she was out of line. I also apologized for jeopardizing her safety, but it was necessary to save everyone else's jobs. After therapy, she realized how flawed her thinking had been. She even laughed when I told her about Jason's downfall. She had a relaxing weekend, mostly sunbathing with coworkers. I don't know much about her social life, but Megan mentioned she occasionally dates but rarely stays in a relationship for long. Honestly, I don't have time to think about it. It's her life, and she has to live with it. 6 months later, Vivian and I got married and moved her and Bessie into my cottage. I watched as she took out a picture of her late husband, Greg, from her suitcase, kissed it, and placed it in a drawer. Touched, I walked over, pulled out a picture of Glory, and placed it on her dressing table. Greg deserves to see his wife happy, well-groomed, and loved, don't you think? Vivian smiled tearfully and hugged me. You're a good man, Samuel. I think Greg and you would have been great friends. My guardian angel has been looking out for me, and now I have 2 soulmates. I felt splendid, better than I had in years. When Bessie is old enough, you'll have to tell her all about her father. They both deserve that. Our fishing resort is growing steadily. Jillian now has an apartment attached to the store, so we always know where to find her. We've added more cabins with docks for weekend fishing enthusiasts. I spend most days in my workshop doing boat repairs and general maintenance. Vivian runs the store, and Bessie, now 5, is always underfoot. I've become a father figure to her, the only one she's ever known. Last summer, we surprised her with a little brother, Brady, who has temporarily relieved her of some of our attention. I fuss over both of them, and even my doctor is pleased. Maybe I should send Amy a thank you card. Just kidding.
Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
I remember the first time I met Liz and Emily. Liz was still that bright, smiling woman back then. Warm, full of life, with a laugh that would light up the room. I fell for her pretty quickly, to be honest. She had this way of making me feel like I was the luckiest man alive. Emily was just a little girl at the time, all of 6 years old, with these big brown eyes that always seemed to be sizing me up. When I proposed to Liz, I didn't just think about marrying her. I was also thinking about being a good husband and a father to Emily. I knew I wasn't her biological dad, but I was prepared to take on that responsibility. I thought maybe, given time, she'd see me as more than just some guy her mom was in love with. At first, things were all right. Liz was patient, understanding even, whenever Emily seemed standoffish. I figured it was just her adjusting to the idea of me being around. I did my best to earn Emily's trust. I'd fix her bike when it broke, taught her how to change a tire when she was old enough. I'd try to help her with her homework, even if she'd just give me these cold looks and say, "I'll wait for Mom." I tried not to take it personally, but it wore on me, you know? The way Emily would look past me, like I was a ghost in my own home. All that effort, trying to connect with her. It was like throwing pebbles into a bottomless well. I knew she missed her real dad, Billy, and I tried to be understanding of that. But it was hard when she'd talk about him like he was some sort of hero, even though he's been locked up for drug trafficking for as long as I've known them. Then there was Liz. At first, she'd tell me to give it time, to be patient with Emily. But somewhere along the way, something shifted. Liz started to change. That warmth I fell in love with started to cool. The patience turned to criticism. Everything I did wasn't good enough. If I came home late from the shop, she'd accuse me of not caring about the family. If I tried to discipline Emily, even just to ask her to pick up after herself, Liz would jump down my throat for being too harsh. The nagging, it was like a slow drip that wore me down. At first, I thought it was just stress. We all have our moments. But it kept getting worse. She'd find a way to twist anything I said or did into something it wasn't. I'd come home exhausted from working overtime to put money into the house, but she'd just accuse me of trying to avoid spending time with them. There were days when I'd pull into the driveway and just sit in the car for a minute, trying to brace myself for whatever fight was coming next. And Emily, God, it felt like she was following Liz's lead. She became colder, more distant. Anytime I tried to talk to her, even just to ask how her day was, it felt like she was looking right through me. I know she writes letters to Billy, sends him pictures, talks about how she can't wait for him to get out. Liz encourages it, Says it's good for her to stay connected to her father. But where does that leave me? I thought I could build a life with them, that we'd find a way to be a family. But now it feels like I'm just an outsider looking in. The worst part? I'm not even sure when it all went wrong. Maybe it was always this way, and I just didn't want to see it. But there are days I wonder how much more of this I can take. It all started over something small. It usually does. I came home from work, hands covered in grease, exhausted after another long day at the shop. The moment I stepped through the door, I saw Emily in the living room, sprawled out on the couch, her school books and snack wrappers scattered all over the coffee table. "Hey, Em," I called out, trying to keep my voice light. "How about you clean up this mess before your mom gets home?" She barely looked up from her phone. "Yeah, whatever." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my frustration in check. "I mean it, Emily. I've asked you before. It's not fair to leave everything for your mom to clean up." That got her attention. She rolled her eyes and finally looked at me, her expression hardening. "Seriously, Alistair? Why do you even care? You're not my dad. So stop pretending you are." That hit me like a punch to the gut, but I swallowed it down, trying to stay calm. "I'm not trying to replace your dad, Emily," I said, my voice tighter than I wanted it to be. "But I am your stepfather, and I'm just asking you to do your part around here." She scoffed and stood up, crossing her arms. "You think just because you married my mom, you get to boss me around? Newsflash, I don't have to listen to you. You're just some guy she settled for because she couldn't do better." That one stung. I could feel my jaw tighten, but I tried to let it slide. I'd learned to pick my battles with her over the years, but today, after the kind of day I'd had, I wasn't in the mood to just take it. "Look, I'm not asking for much here. Just clean up after yourself. It's called respect, Emily." "Respect?" She let out a bitter laugh. "You don't get to talk to me about respect. If you respected me at all, you'd stay out of my life. I don't need you trying to act like you're some kind of dad. My real dad might be in jail, but at least he actually cares about me." I could feel my hands clenching into fists, not out of anger at her, but out of the sheer helplessness of the situation. I knew there was nothing I could say that would change how she saw me. "You think he cares about you?" I shot back, my voice rising despite myself. "Where is he, then?" "Huh. He's in a cell because he chose drugs over you. And I'm here, trying to make sure you have a stable life." "But sure, yeah, I'm the bad guy." Her eyes flashed with rage, and for a second, I thought she might throw something at me. "You think I'd choose you over him? Never. He's my dad, no matter what. And nothing you do is ever going to change that." I just stood there, staring at her, feeling like everything I tried to build with her over the past 8 years was crumbling right in front of me. "Fine," I muttered under my breath. "You don't want me in your life?" Message received. I turned on my heel and stormed out the door, the sound of her laughter following me. I walked out into the cold evening air, grumbling under my breath, wishing there was a way to get through to her. But maybe she was right. Maybe I was just fooling myself thinking I could ever be more than just her mom's husband. It all went to hell. I never saw it coming. One moment, I was driving back from the hardware store, thinking about what groceries I needed to pick up, and the next, everything went black. I woke up days later in a sterile hospital room, with machines beeping and tubes stuck into my arms. I tried to move, but a searing pain shot through my legs. The doctor explained it all to me, his voice calm and clinical, like he was talking about someone else entirely. Multiple fractures, torn ligaments. It would take months of physical therapy just to stand on my own 2 feet again. I'd lost my job, but the company agreed to pay out some damages, so I guess that was something. But through all of it, 2 weeks of hell in that hospital, I kept waiting for Liz to walk through that door. For Emily, even, to at least show up, if only to pretend to care. But the only one who came every day was my mother, Martha. God bless her. She sat by my side, made sure I ate, helped the nurses change my bandages when they were short-staffed. Liz never showed. Not once. When they finally discharged me, I was excited to go home, even if the thought of climbing those front steps with my busted legs made me cringe. But that excitement didn't last long. As soon as I opened the door, there she was, Liz, standing in the living room with a look on her face that was more annoyed than relieved. "What's going on, Liz?" I asked, my voice weak, barely above a whisper. She crossed her arms over her chest and looked at me like I was some stranger off the street. "Alistair, I think it's best if you don't come back here. I've already filed for divorce. You'll be getting the papers soon." I just stood there, leaning on my crutches, trying to process her words. "Divorce? Are you serious right now? After everything?" "Yes, Alistair. I'm serious, she snapped, her voice sharp like a knife. I can't deal with this anymore. You're not the man I married. And now, with you being like this, she gestured vaguely to my leg braces, it's just too much. I need someone who can actually take care of things, not someone who's going to be a burden. A burden. That's what I had become in her eyes. Not her husband, not the man who tried his damnedest to be a father to her daughter, but just dead weight to be cast aside. Liz, I started, but I could barely get the words out. What was there to say? My world was crumbling, and she was already kicking me while I was down. Just go, Alistair, she said, her voice cold and final. You can't stay here. I've already changed the locks. I turned to look at Emily, who was standing in the corner, her arms folded, watching it all with that same indifferent look she always had. She didn't say a word, didn't even flinch as I struggled to turn back toward the door. My mother, bless her heart, was waiting in the car. She came in when she saw me struggling, took one look at Liz, and something dark and angry flickered in her eyes. You're really going to do this? Mom asked Liz, her voice low and steady. You're throwing him out when he can barely walk? Liz didn't even hesitate. Yes, I am. It's what's best for all of us. Mom shook her head slowly, her lips pressed into a thin line. You'll regret this, Liz. Mark my words. You're throwing away the best thing you ever had. And one day, you'll realize that, when it's far too late. Liz just rolled her eyes, but I could see a flicker of uncertainty pass over her face. Mom helped me into the car, her touch gentle but firm. We'll get you through this, she whispered to me, her voice cracking. You're coming home with me. As we drove away, I couldn't help but look back at that house. The house I poured years of my life into, hoping it would become a home for all of us. Now, it was just another place that didn't want me anymore. And as we pulled onto the highway, leaving that life behind, I couldn't shake the feeling that the man I was before that accident was gone forever. All that was left now was a broken shell, trying to figure out where the hell I go from here. 3 months later, I sat in the courtroom, gripping the handles of my crutches as I tried to steady my nerves. My legs were still shaky, the dull ache a constant reminder of the accident that changed everything. Mom sat next to me, her hand on my shoulder, giving me silent strength. Across the aisle, there was Liz, looking as put together as ever in a crisp blouse and her hair perfectly styled. But this time, she wasn't alone. Standing next to her was Hank, fresh out of prison, dressed like he was attending some casual brunch instead of a court hearing that was about to decide my future. The sight of him made my blood boil. I couldn't believe she had the nerve to bring that man here. The judge, an older man with a stern expression, shuffled through the papers in front of him before looking up at Liz. His eyes were sharp, assessing. Mrs. Thompson, he began, his voice echoing in the silent room. I've reviewed the details of this case and frankly, I am appalled by the timing of your divorce filing. Liz blinked, clearly taken aback. Your Honor, No, he cut her off, raising a hand. You don't get to justify this. Your husband here, he gestured towards me, just came out of a hospital after a life-altering accident. He's disabled, out of work, and yet, instead of supporting him through his recovery, you filed for divorce and effectively threw him out on the streets. Do you have any idea how callous that appears? Liz's face flushed. She tried to regain her composure, her eyes flicking nervously toward Hank, who just shrugged like he couldn't care less. Your Honor, it's just, things were not working out between us. It was best for both of us to move on. The judge's eyebrows shot up. Move on? You left your disabled husband with nowhere to go, Mrs. Thompson. And you say this was best for both of you? He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a cold tone. I would have expected a bit more compassion. I watched Liz squirm, but I kept my mouth shut. I wasn't about to give her the satisfaction of seeing me break down. Furthermore, the judge continued, flipping through another set of papers. I see that you've been living in a house that belongs to Mr. Thompson's mother, not you. He glanced over at Martha, who nodded. Which means, Mrs. Thompson, you and your daughter will need to vacate the premises immediately. Liz's eyes widened. What? That can't be right. We've been living there for years. That's my home. Your home? The judge shot back, his eyes narrowing. I don't think so. Legally, it belongs to Mrs. Martha Thompson here, who has every right to ask you to leave, which she has already asked in a petition here. Hank muttered something under his breath, clearly annoyed, but Liz quickly tried to smooth things over. Your Honor, surely we can work something out. The judge wasn't having any of it. No, Mrs. Thompson. You will vacate that property by the end of the week, or you will face legal consequences. And one more thing, he added, looking down at yet another document. Given Mr. Thompson's current condition, unemployed and unable to work due to his injuries, it is only fair that you provide him with alimony. Liz's face went pale. Alimony? But he's the one who… The judge cut her off again, his voice steely. Your daughter, Emily, legally she is not the daughter of Mr. Thompson, so no child support is required here. I glanced at Mom, who gave me a small, triumphant smile. This wasn't just justice. It was a reckoning for all the ways Liz had tried to kick me when I was down. Liz looked like she was going to faint. But, Your Honor, this is unfair. Unfair? The judge replied with a sarcastic laugh. I think you'll find that life is rarely fair, Mrs. Thompson. You had a chance to do the right thing, and you chose otherwise. Now, you will live with the consequences. As the judge banged his gavel, signaling the end of the proceedings, I couldn't help but feel a mix of relief and vindication. Liz, red-faced and seething, stormed out of the courtroom with Hank trailing behind her like a lost puppy. For once, she couldn't manipulate her way out of this mess. Mom turned to me, squeezing my hand gently. I told you, son, they'd regret crossing you. I nodded, feeling the weight lift off my chest. Yeah, Ma, you were right. I wasn't whole yet, not by a long shot, but for the first time in months, I felt like I was finally standing on solid ground, even if I still needed crutches to do it. 2 days. That's all it took for Liz to hit rock bottom after the court verdict. I should have known she wouldn't go down quietly. But even with all the years I spent with her, I never imagined she would sink to this. It was late, maybe past midnight, and I was in my old childhood bedroom at my mother's place. My legs were still wrapped in braces, and getting up on my own was a struggle. The house was dead quiet except for the hum of the old fridge and the occasional creak of the floorboards as Mom moved around downstairs. She was always up late these days, making sure everything was locked up tight. I thought it was just her being overprotective after everything that happened. Turns out, she had a damn good reason to be on edge. A loud crash came from the back of the house, jolting me awake. At first, I thought I was dreaming, but then I heard Mom's voice, sharp and commanding, like she used to sound when I was a kid and I'd pushed her too far. Stop right there. Don't take another step, or I swear to God I'll put you down. There was shouting, a man's voice, deep and angry, followed by the sound of a scuffle. It didn't take long for me to recognize who it was. Hank. That lowlife had the audacity to come to my mother's house. I reached for my crutches, struggling to get myself upright, but I was still too slow. The next sound I heard made my blood run cold. The deafening roar of a shotgun blast. I couldn't move fast enough, couldn't get down those damn stairs, so I just gripped the banister and listened, my heart hammering in my chest. Liz, don't do it. I heard Mom yell, her voice carrying through the walls. There was another loud bang, and then silence. When I finally hobbled my way down to the living room, the scene that greeted me was like something out of a nightmare. Hank was lying on the floor, blood pooling around him, his eyes wide open but lifeless. Liz was slumped against the wall, clutching her side, gasping for breath. And in the middle of it all stood my mother, Martha, her old shotgun smoking, her eyes cold and steady. Ma, what the hell? I stammered, trying to process what I was seeing. Mom turned to me, her face hard as stone, but her hands were steady. They broke in. Alistair. They were coming for us. Liz was groaning, barely conscious, but still alive. I stared at her, my mind reeling. Liz, why? I managed to choke out. You've already taken everything. What more could you possibly want? She looked up at me, her face twisted with rage, even through the pain. You think you won? She spat, blood bubbling at the corner of her mouth. This was never about you, Alistair. It was about what we deserved. That house. All of it should have been ours. Hank and I. We were going to make sure of it. Martha stepped forward, her shotgun still aimed squarely at Liz, but she didn't pull the trigger again. You two thought you could come into my home and take what's mine, she said, her voice low and dangerous. You clearly didn't know who you were dealing with. I glanced at Mom, confused. How did you? She gave me a grim smile, not taking her eyes off Liz. I never told you everything about my past, son. Before I was your mother, I was a cop. And not a desk jockey, either. I've seen my share of crooks like them. She nudged Hank's lifeless body with her boot, her lip curling in disgust. The police arrived soon after, sirens blaring as they tore up the gravel driveway. Liz was taken away on a stretcher, barely clinging to life. As they loaded her into the ambulance, she looked at me one last time with pure hatred in her eyes. You think this is over, Alistair? She hissed. I'll make you pay for this. I didn't bother responding. What was left to say? She'd already lost everything, and now she was facing the possibility of spending the rest of her life behind bars. Later, after the police had taken their statements and Hank's body was removed, Mom and I sat in the living room, the old shotgun leaning against the wall. She poured us both a stiff drink, her hands finally shaking now that the adrenaline was wearing off. Ma, you saved my life, I said, still trying to wrap my head around what had just happened. She gave a tired smile, taking a long sip of her whiskey. I'll always protect you, Alistair, even if it means picking up an old habit. I looked at her, this woman who I thought I knew so well, and realized that maybe I never really understood just how strong she truly was. As broken as I felt, as lost as everything seemed, at least I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't alone in this fight. Not as long as Mom was around. 2 weeks later, Emily showed up on my doorstep like a stray cat looking for scraps. It had only been a few days since everything went down, since her mother and that lowlife Hank tried to finish me off in my own home. I still couldn't walk properly without my crutches, but I was slowly gaining strength back, thanks to Mom's relentless care. When I opened the door, there she was, Emily, standing there with that familiar defiant glare in her eyes. The same look she used to give me every time I tried to be anything resembling a father to her. I wasn't sure what she wanted, but I knew it wasn't going to be an apology. Emily, I said flatly, what are you doing here? She crossed her arms, her chin jutting out. I need money, she said without a shred of hesitation. For school and everything else. You're still supposed to take care of me. That's what you promised, Mom. I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. I leaned heavily on my crutch, shaking my head in disbelief. You've got some nerve showing up here after everything that happened. Her eyes flashed, anger rising. This is your responsibility, Alistair. You married my mom. That means you're supposed to take care of me. I'm still your daughter. Daughter? I spat, my voice rising. You made it clear a long time ago that I was never your father. Remember that? You're not my dad. You'll never be my dad. I mimicked, throwing her own words back at her. You don't get to pick and choose when it's convenient to call me that. She flinched, but her resolve didn't crack. Look, I need help, all right? Mom's in the hospital and Hank's, well, you know. It's just me now. Yeah, I know. And I also know I don't owe you a damn thing. I turned, grabbing the map I'd been holding on to just in case she pulled something like this. Here, I said, shoving it into her hands. Why don't you take this and go find someone who actually cares? She unfolded the map, confusion twisting her face. What's this? That, I said coldly, is a map to your grandma's house. Liz's mother or Hank's family. You remember them, right? The people who actually have a responsibility toward you. Go find them, Emily. Because I'm done. Her eyes filled with tears, but I wasn't moved. For years, I tried to be there for her, tried to make her part of a family that never wanted me. All those times she shut me out, all the sneering comments, the cold shoulders. Now she was desperate, and suddenly I was good enough? No, not anymore. Please, Alistair, she said, her voice breaking now. I don't have anywhere else to go. I let out a long, tired sigh. You told me to back off, remember? That I was nothing to you. Well, you got your wish. I'm not your father, Emily. I never was, and I'm done pretending. I turned my back on her, hobbling back inside. Go find your real family, I called over my shoulder. Because this door is closed. I heard her sob once, a choked sound that almost made me turn back. Almost. But I kept walking. I'd given enough of myself to that girl, to Liz, to all their drama. I was done being their punching bag. The door clicked shut behind me, and for the first time in years, it actually felt like I was free. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.